all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in these southern United States. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you have anything to add, let us know and leave us a voicemail. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. You can also join us on YouTube and Facebook and leave us a chat. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us today. We were not live last week, so lots of news to catch up on. Hope you enjoyed some of our pre-taped reruns and friend of the show segments. I think we had some good stuff for you last week, so let us know if you had any thoughts about that. Adam, you have some Alabama updates for us. Talk to us about what's been going on in Alabama.
Yeah, especially since we were not live last week, there's a lot of news to catch up on. So we wanted to start today's show with headlines from across Sweet Home, Alabama. You know, we've got new laws that are starting, potential laws already being proposed for next year, and then some updates in education, the economy, the justice system, and of course, politics. So several new laws from the legislative session went into effect on July 1st. In good news, that does include paid parental leave for state and education employees, which is a big win for workers' rights and family values. In 2023, the legislature passed a bill by House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels, Democrat from Huntsville, to exempt overtime pay from the state income tax. And it was very popular among a lot of unions. After it cost more than anticipated, lawmakers let the exemption expire on June 30th, which is a sunset date added to the bill back in 2023 because of uncertainty about how much it would affect school funding. In other tax news, lawmakers did pass a bill to reduce the state sales tax on food from 3% to 2%, estimated to save taxpayers about $120 million a year. And another bill will exempt diapers, baby formula, feminine hygiene products, and other items known as the pink tax from the state sales tax, which is 4%. That's expected to save taxpayers about $13 million a year. And both that food tax reduction and the baby product exemption take effect September 1st. Now, another new law that's getting a lot of news in Alabama is HB 445, which bans the sale and possession of all smokable hemp products, as well as some hemp gummies and drinks. Violations will be a Class C felony, punishable by up to 1 to 10 years in prison. Now, several businesses sued to block it, but were denied a temporary restraining order by a Montgomery County judge. While more and more states across the country are legalizing recreational marijuana, Alabama is moving backwards in banning federally legal hemp products and killing businesses and jobs in the process, with law enforcement raids on hemp businesses already occurring. A bill by Senator April Weaver is pre-filed for next year and would go even further, classifying all THC taken from hemp as a controlled substance, banning the products entirely. And so that leads us into the 2026 session, which starts in January, and there's already some pre-filed bills and discussions starting. State Senator Gerald Allen, a Republican from Tuscaloosa, has proposed an amendment to the Alabama Memorial Preservation Act, which is designed to prevent removal of Confederate monuments. Pre-filed this year is Senate Bill 6. His amendment would change the financial penalty from a one-time fee of $25,000 to a daily fee of $5,000 on municipalities that remove a monument. So instead of a one-time line item of $25K, a city looking to permanently remove a monument or memorial would be looking at an annual allocation of over $1.8 million. It would cost the city $36.5 million to keep a monument removed for 20 years under this bill. In other pre-filings, Senate Bill 3, sponsored by State Senator Shay Shelnut, a Republican from Trussville, aims to require all public K-12 sex education initiatives to, quote, exclusively teach sexual risk avoidance. Senate Bill 4, also pre-filed by Shelnut, quote, would require each local Board of Education to implement a policy allowing elective credit to students who are released from the classroom to attend religious instruction during the school day. In similar news, a mandate to display the Ten Commandments in public schools did not pass this past year, and court challenges are likely if it ever does. Sponsored by Mark Gidley in the House and Senator Keith Kelly from Anniston, it would have required public K-12 schools to display an 11 by 14-inch poster of the Ten Commandments in common areas and classrooms where American history is taught, and the bill is likely returned next session. In maybe more exciting news, State Rep Marilyn Lands, a Democrat here in Huntsville, has pre-filed a bill for the 26th session that would give everyday citizens the power to initiate general laws and constitutional amendments. House Bill 14, titled Alabama We the People Act, would create a process for Alabama citizens to put forward proposals for new laws. Families of about 23,000 Alabama students can start using public funds for private education as of July 1st. The CHOOSE Act allows families to apply for up to $7,000 in education savings accounts that can be spent on private school tuition or homeschooling. The majority of approvals went to students currently enrolled in private school who plan to stay in private school, according to AL.com. In other education news, President Trump's attempt to freeze nearly $7 billion in congressionally approved federal education grants for personnel and after-school programs means Alabama schools will lose about $68 million. Richard Franklin, president of the Birmingham chapter of the American Federation of Teachers, said in an interview last week that the withholding of congressionally approved funds should have never happened in the first place. They're using our kids as political pawns to prove a point politically, when we should all be providing our kids with an education, he said. Senate Bill 305, sponsored by Senator Arthur Orr, Republican from Decatur, known as the RAISE Act, created additional funds to public schools based on weights like number of students in poverty or special education. While celebrated as a step in the right direction, supporters are already warning it may take time to notice results from the modest funding reform. The Decatur City Board of Education approved a 3% salary increase for all employees during a recent board meeting. Decatur City Schools said that the state didn't provide a raise to employees this year, so the school board made it a priority to provide an increase to employees themselves. Alabama fell 4 ranks in overall child well-being in the National Kids Count numbers released last week. Alabama ranks 43rd in overall child well-being, according to the data. That ranking is determined by 4 subgroups: economic well-being, education, health, and family and community. Alabama declined in all 4 indicators. Are you tired of winning yet? A federal judge heard arguments last week in a lawsuit alleging that the anti-DEI, or Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion law passed last year, violates the constitutional rights of professors and students. The suit, brought by professors and students in the University of Alabama system against Governor Ivey and the University of Alabama Board of Trustees, alleges that SB 129 stifled instructional activity and violated both the First and 14th Amendment rights of the plaintiffs. In court, we also learned that a University of Alabama professor and administrator accused a member of the Alabama State House of Representatives of threatening a fellowship program's budget if its curriculum was not changed to comply with the state law banning DEI programs and so-called divisive concepts. And last thing, on the higher ed front, the University of Montevallo is raising tuition, laying off staff, and removing some academic programs as it works to address a multi-million-dollar budget shortfall. Lots of news around the justice system in the state, and starting here at home, the city of Huntsville has settled a federal lawsuit filed by a man who was tased and repeatedly stomped on by an officer while they attempted to arrest him at a MAPCO gas station back in 2021. An incident caught on camera that circulated widely on social media. The city of Huntsville has also agreed to pay an accident victim $25,000 to settle a lawsuit involving a police officer in a December 2022 car wreck. More than 200 folks gathered in Homewood for a vigil for Jabari Peoples, a teenager fatally shot by Homewood police on June 23rd, with the family demanding answers. An Etowah County woman who claimed she was forced to give birth without any medical help in a jail shower settled a federal civil rights lawsuit against the county, jail officials, and doctors last week. Governor Kay Ivey set an August execution date for David Lee Roberts, who was convicted of murder in 1992. Roberts, age 59, is scheduled to be put to death August 21st by nitrogen gas. He is the fourth person the state will put to death this year and the third using that method of execution. The state judicial staff will conduct a review of fees imposed in Alabama's court system to better understand the financial issues faced by people going through the legal system, following a meeting of the Court Cost Task Force last week. The legal system is considered heavily reliant on fines and fees while remaining chronically underfunded. In related news, Lee Gwathney's controversial term as chair of the Alabama Board of Pardons and Paroles is ending, and we're not sure if she'll be reappointed, though Attorney General Steve Marshall has voiced his public support for her. The parole board has received criticism for not even complying with its own guidelines, and pardons and paroles have plummeted during her term. In other local news here, Kyle Luter, a former chairman of the Madison County Young Republicans and local influencer in GOP circles, is still facing charges for murder and sexual torture of a 54-year-old harvestman. The Alabama Crime Victims Compensation Commission has approved a whopping payment of $731.33 to the victim's family in this case. The FBI detained 37 in an immigration raid at the $131 million Gulf Shore High School at construction site down at the beach. Immigrants in Alabama facing possible deportation are less likely than many other states to have a lawyer, according to data reported on at AL.com. Moving into the economy, it was Made in the USA Day, apparently, on July 2nd, and Governor Ivey signed a formal proclamation celebrating Alabama's manufacturing community, which apparently accounts for 16% of Alabama's gross domestic product, with economic output exceeding $50 billion last year, supporting more than 290,000 jobs, at least according to the National Association of Manufacturers Industry Group. A WARN notice states that AT&T Alabama will be laying off employees in the Huntsville area. The notice shows that the company will lay off 73 employees starting in September. And in Alabama, new data shows that the under 18 population remained flat from 2020 to 2024 at about 1.13 million people. Meanwhile, the over 65 population grew from about 861,000 in 2020 to nearly 956,000 in 2024, an 11% increase. And in political news, State Rep Matt Woods, a Republican from Walker County, is moving up to the Senate after easily winning a special election for Senate District 5 against Democratic opponent Ryan Cagle. Voters in Tuscaloosa County will choose between the chair of the county's Democratic Party, Judith Taylor, and a Republican city councilman, Norman Crow, in a January special election for an Alabama House seat. This House District 63 seat opened up after Rep. Cynthia Allman resigned earlier this month to become president of the Alabama Public Service Commission. Former U.S. Senator Doug Jones has endorsed and plans to campaign for Democratic Alabama House candidate Alex Braswell, running in an August special election for a House District 11 in Coleman and Blount counties. New fundraising reports have come out, and Secretary of State Wes Allen has emerged as the fundraising frontrunner in the race for lieutenant governor. Meanwhile, Tommy Tuberville has raised over $350,000 since announcing his run for governor in late May. And finally, lots of fallout from the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which we'll be covering in depth today from various angles. Both of Alabama's Republican senators, Tuberville and Katie Britt, supported it, along with the state's Republican congressional delegation, and the state's two Democrats in the House, Terry Sewell and Shamari Figures, both voted against it. Britt told CNN that proposed Medicaid and SNAP cuts will not affect Alabamians who truly need the services, and that this is about accountability. In Alabama, an average of about 750,000 people received SNAP benefits last year, which was a total of almost $1.8 billion, according to the Alabama Department of Human Resources. The bill also affects Medicaid, which in 22 served more than 1 million Alabamians, including almost 57% of the state's children, and paid for half of the births in the state. At a press conference last week, Alabama Rise's Robin Hyden said the bill that passed would force Alabama and other states for the first time to help pay SNAP benefits that have been fully paid for by federal funds, which is a change that could cost the state up to $300 million a year. And there's no idea if the state will be able to cover that or will force cuts in other programs. There's also cuts to the Affordable Care Act subsidies, and there's estimates of nearly 200,000 Alabamians losing health coverage as a result of these changes. So a lot more to unpack there. You can go to alarise.org to see their full statement, and we'll be diving into the big bill a lot today.
Yep. But we've got our union profile up right now. Gage Kennedy is a fourth-year apprentice with the Ironworkers Union Local 477. He's going to be talking to us about the apprenticeship program over at Local 477 and the Southeastern District Council's apprenticeship competition that took place in Muscle Shoals last week. Gage, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for letting me be a part of it, brother.
I appreciate it. I really do. So talk to us about how you became an apprentice with the Ironworkers.
Well, I was working for G&G Steel and doing a lot of welding, this and that. And, man, they just don't pay you for your time out there in these industries out there. So I seen some signs with the Ironworkers local needing some ironworkers. And so I called up there, put an application in, and had a few buddies that know some people up there to help me get in. And that's about how it started for me, man, and it's been an amazing trip so far.
Yeah, that's definitely great to hear that you're hopefully feeling a little bit better about your pay now coming out of G&G. Sounds like you told me that you wish you had started the apprenticeship right out of high school instead of maybe going into some of the other industries that you went into before getting into the apprenticeship program. Why is that?
Well, I wished I would have started right out of high school because I would have been able to learn a lot more at a young age, and instead of bouncing around job to job, and working for pennies on a dime. And the ironworkers. If I could have started at the age of 18, man, you could have went from 18 to 20, and been topped out at a younger age than I am now, and that's kind of why I wished I would have started then instead of doing what I did do.
Yeah. I mentioned that you're a fourth-year apprentice now. Can you talk about a little bit about your experience as an apprentice with Local 477? Like, what has that been like?
Oh man, it's been good. I've met a lot of good people and learned a lot of things that I didn't know. There's certain things that you learn from ironwork that you can't learn anywhere else. There's good and bad and everything, but the ironwork, I've learned a lot of stuff, man. It's going to help me further on in the future. And other than that, that's about it, brother. I'm not real sure.
Yeah, no,
had a
sure.
good time.
That I bet. I mean, no doubt that you're learning a lot about ironworking, a lot more than I'll ever know, probably. What about being a member of a union? You actually live in Mississippi, even though the local is headquartered in Muscle Shoals. It's pretty close to the Mississippi state line. Did you grow up around union folks very often, and do folks kind of look at you a little weird being a union member, or what is that like, being a union member in Mississippi, and did you have any problems going into the union?
No, I didn't have. I've had a few family members. They ain't part of the ironworkers, but they're part of the IBW. And my father-in-law, and some people look at you different because there's a lot of people that don't like the union, and it's bread and butter for me. I love the union. It's where the money's at, and so yeah, you're gonna have people that looks at you different because they want the union gone. You're gonna always have that, but like I always said, if shoe fits, wear it, and I'm a union man. I think it's the best way to make a living, honestly, for where we're at in the South. But yeah, there's a lot of controversy, I guess you could say, where I live about the
Well, what do you? I guess you just kind of stick to like, well, look, I make more money, and so leave me. Like, what else do you want me to do? Right? Is that kind of how it goes, or like, what do those conversations look like?
Well, yeah, there's a bunch of jealousy there. It must be nice. That's a well word that people use around here. You can either be a go getter or you can stay here and work for these people that don't want to pay you.
Mm-hmm.
Stay in these want to give you low wages for nothing. So that's kind of what I tell them. They start on me about it, and I say, look, if you want to make real money and an honest day's worth of work for your pay, you're going to join the union, and it's a brotherhood. Everybody's your brother and your sister in the union, and that's it's just a big argument there. A lot of people say that they shouldn't pay us what they pay us, and I think that's just where the jealousy comes in at, and that's fine with me. If they want to stay here and work for pennies and a dime, they can, and I'll stay with the union.
It has always been funny to me because I have, run into that attitude sometimes myself. People talking about UPS drivers shouldn't make as much money as they do. Maybe union journeymen in the building trades shouldn't make as much as they do. And it's always been, perplexing to me that sort of jealousy is so often pointed at working people who make, maybe 10 to 20 to on the upper ends 50% more than, what a comparable non-union worker is going to be making. And it's not pointed, at the bosses and and the people who own the companies who are making not 50% more than, the people that they employ, but 10, 20, 30, 300 times more than the people that they employ. So it's always, but I guess that's good for the bosses that you can get folks angry at folks who make 50% more and not think about the people who make 300 times more, I guess.
Yeah.
So you recently participated in the Ironworkers Southeastern District's apprenticeship competition. Explain to folks what that is. Folks who aren't in the building trades or aren't ironworkers. That may be something that they don't know anything about. So what is the apprenticeship competition that the union puts on every year?
Well, all the unions in the Southeast District, they all have their own competition at their union hall, and so whoever places first, like the best of the best, all go against each other, and you have your welding, your cutting, your rod tying, and your transit knots, and column climb there at the end. It's basically it comes down to see who's the best of the best in the South, at doing the ironwork. What goes on in the ironwork, and then that's kind of the way it's laid out, and the way I looked at it anyway. But that's kind of what I got out of it. It was a good time. It's an amazing experience. If anybody's got a chance of doing it,
Yeah, I've been to one of them just to observe. It was in Chattanooga a couple of years ago, and it really was. It was really cool, and it's such a friendly sort of competition. Even as everybody wants to do as good as they can, but it wasn't one of those things where people are upset or so competitive that there's like hurt feelings or anything. Everybody was just really happy for everybody to compete and do as good as they can, and then the winner from the Southeast. From the Southeast competition goes on to the national competition, isn't that right?
Yes, that's correct. I believe it's the first and second place.
The first and second place from the districts. And do you know when the national competition is going to be?
I want to say it's about this same time next year. I'm not 100%, but I think so.
Gotcha. Well, I know that you competed for Local 477. I don't think that you placed first or second, but obviously, I'm sure that you are, and I know that we are rooting for the Southeastern folks to represent in the national competition. Always love to see folks from the South winning. So wishing them the best of luck, obviously. As we let you go, is there anything that you would like to say for folks that are thinking about a career in the trades, or maybe, maybe they're graduating high school, or they're unhappy in the career that they're in right now? What would you say to somebody like that?
Yeah, I say if if you're not going to go to college to be lawyer, doctor, anything like that, I say get out and join a trade. Because I just honestly, I'm not against college. You got a scholarship, go for it. But if you want to not have student loans piled up on you that you may never pay off, for years to come, get out and get into a trade, because you're going to meet a lot of good people, a lot of good friends and lifelong friends, and make a lot of money where, coming out of college, I'm not sure that you would do that right out the gate. So that's what I would tell young folks is, for sure, come out of high school, join a trade. I wish high schools would put it on more like they used to back in the day, but they just don't do it no more,
Right. Yeah, I can say that, I have a college degree, and immediately after I went into my career, I was making less than a first-year apprentice. I think that my pay by the time that I topped out was a little bit above a journeyman at like year 5 or something like that. But it took a while, and I had 4 years where I was not really earning in the same way that somebody from the building trades would have. So it's definitely something that you want to consider. Even if you are thinking about going to college, you want to weigh your options for sure. So. Gage Kennedy, 4th-year apprentice for the Ironworkers Local Union 477 out of Muscle Shoals, Alabama, living in Mississippi. Thank you so much for your time, Gage. Is there anything else that you want to leave people with before we let you go?
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to the guys, back at the local, Eddie Mitchell, Jeb Miles, and Barry, and all the guys at the training center, man. If there's anybody in our area here, go give them a shot, man. Become an apprentice and start in the trades, because I think it's a good thing. It's worth your time if you've got the time and energy. I think it's a good thing to do, and we need more members. So that's about all I got, brother.
Absolutely. And you'll hear, folks listening to us will hear the Ironworkers ad play soon, so you'll hear the phone number to call if you want to join the Ironworkers. Gage Kennedy, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Yep. We're going to be taking a break here momentarily, and we're going to be coming back with David Dayen, the executive editor of the American Prospect, to break down this one big, beautiful bill. Really bad. I'm honestly a little sick to my stomach thinking about what it's going to do to the country. But we've also got some other stuff. We've got Last Week in Southern Labor we're going to be getting to, and we're going to get to Boss Watch, obviously, as we do every week. Phones are not open right now, but you can leave us a voicemail, as you can at any time. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. And we've got a great overtime lined up for you today. We are going to be talking to Chuck Corra from Apod Latcha, a podcast and media project focusing on Appalachia, culture and news and stuff like that. Talking to him about some stuff that's going on in Tennessee and West Virginia. And we've got some UAW and Teamsters news, and we have a voicemail from a postal worker about the EVs that we want to share with you. So lots of stuff to talk about. Make sure that you stay tuned. Appreciate everybody listening to the Valley Labor Report. We're going to take a break, and we are going to be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. Today, we talk to David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect, about the One Big Beautiful Bill. We also talk about what workers were up to in the South last week and what bosses were up to in the South, what laws they were breaking. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number. The line is not open, but you can leave us a voicemail right now, as you can at any time throughout the week. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining member to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to TVLR.fm/donate or Patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, we've got a bunch of really cool merch for sale at TVLR.fm/store. Shirts, hats, and stickers. All good stuff, union made in the USA. And finally, if you're a member of a union, think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey y'all, let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener, we really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely. Let's get to Last Week in Southern Labor, the segment that we do every week where we take a look at what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to. This week, from June the 13th to July the 4th, this is a 2-week update, and as such, we're not going to be able to get to everything on the radio, so if you want to get the exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor, then subscribe to the newsletter. That's TVLR.fm. In new union campaigns, 220 workers at International Motors in Huntsville, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Auto Workers, UAW. 11 workers at Wells Fargo in Cartersville, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Communication Workers of America, CWA. 73 workers at Norfolk Botanical Garden in Norfolk, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists, IAM. 23 workers at Starbucks in Alpharetta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United, as did 18 more at a location in Beaumont, Texas. 360 workers at Pratt and Whitney Engine Services in Bridgeport, West Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the IAM. In union election results, 18 workers at Skyworks in Decatur, Alabama, voted at 11-4 in favor of unionization with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE, Local 320. 44 workers at the J.B. Speed Art Museum in Louisville, Kentucky, voted 22-2 in favor of unionization with the UAW. 162 workers at Mon Power, a First Energy company in Haywood, West Virginia, voted 84-72 to stick with the Utility Workers Union of America, UWUA, in a decertification election. 15 workers at Starbucks in Tampa, Florida, voted 8-5 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United, as did 21 workers at a location in Fayetteville, North Carolina, voting 12-0. 35 workers at Compass Youth Services in Richmond, Virginia, voted 21-5 in favor of unionization with the Teamsters Local 322. In strikes and bargaining updates, after working under an expired contract for nearly a year, union firefighters, members of the Brevard County Professional Firefighters Union Local 2969 for Brevard County, Florida, declared an impasse and had their contract negotiations heard before a judge. The judge recommended that the county accept the union's proposal, although this recommendation is not binding. If accepted, it would raise wages by at least 10% and up to 26% in the first year. After 3,200 members of the Teamsters Local 577 at Tyson's in Amarillo, Texas, voted by 98% to authorize a strike, management agreed to offer a fair contract, according to the union. The new contract, overwhelmingly ratified by the members, includes a 32% wage increase over 4 years, more paid time off, and expanded retirement benefits. 3,200 members of the IAM District Council 837 at Boeing in St. Louis, Missouri began contract negotiations last week. The contract is set to expire on July 27th, 2025. Workers at Genesis, who recently unionized with Teamsters Local 322 in Virginia, are voting on whether or not to authorize a strike as contract negotiations heat up. Workers at H&M in Melbourne, Florida, who unionized with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW Local 1625 last year, just voted to ratify their first union contract. The union says the new contract includes annual wage increases, weekly hour guarantees, and more. The Teamsters say that the United Parcel Service, UPS, is expected to unveil a plan later this month to buy out full-time Teamster employees that the union says violates their national contract. The union has also filed information requests on the status of delivery of trucks with AC and on the promised job creation from the last contract. The Teamsters encourages their members to attend a webinar that is going to be happening on Monday to learn about the status of these items. Nurses at the University Medical Center in New Orleans, Louisiana, represented by National Nurses United, voted to authorize another 2-day strike against the hospital to protest the hospital's retaliation against union members. The strike will take place on July 15th. In political and legislative updates, Congress passed and the president signed into law a huge transfer of wealth from poor and working people to wealthy people in the form of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Unions were almost unanimously opposed. North America's building trades unions, NABTU, a typically much more politically conservative federation of blue-collar trade unions, said in a statement that this piece of legislation is the biggest job-killing bill in the history of this country, the equivalent of terminating more than 1,000 Keystone XL pipeline projects, threatening an estimated 1.75 million construction jobs and over 3 billion work hours, which translates to $148 billion in lost annual wages and benefits. The AFL-CIO slammed the legislation as a billionaire giveaway. The Machinists Union noted that rail workers were excluded from the overtime tax cut and said that the bill as a whole is a blatant attack on working families. The International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE, noted that they and others were able to get the AI regulation ban removed, but still condemned the legislation as a betrayal. The UAW said that anyone who claims to stand with workers should see this bill for what it is, a disaster. The Labor Department ended several protections for workers last week, including eliminating overtime and minimum wage protections for home health care workers and union organizing rights for migrant farm workers, according to the Washington Post. The Orlando Weekly also points out that OSHA is seeking to roll back protections for entertainment workers. The U.S. House held a hearing last week where Republicans and their witnesses attempted to make the case for privatization of the Postal Service. If we missed anything, let us know about your union updates at tvlr.fm/contact. We'd love to be able to include it, especially, some of the smaller local wins that unions get every single week. Unions winning grievances, getting people their jobs back, stuff like that. Would love to be able to highlight more of those. So, like we've been saying, we are going to be trying to dig into the weeds of the One Big Beautiful Bill, talking about how this is going to affect working people, particularly in the South, but all over the country. It's going to have a lot of problematic effects, from the Medicaid and SNAP cuts to the job-killing effects on the economy, and the the deportation machine being ramped up. That's something that's, It's all really, really concerning. And we have booked David Dayen, executive editor of the American Prospect, to talk about this with us. Really looking forward to this conversation. Have we got David? Still standing by for David. Okay. So while we wait for David, then, I think that we will probably go ahead and take our second break, and then we're going to be right back with David Dayen to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill. Stay tuned. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. We appreciate everybody tuning in. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. You can also participate in our chat on Facebook and YouTube at the Valley Labor Report. Let's jump right into our interview. We've got David Dayen, executive editor at the American Prospect, on the line with us. David, welcome back to the program. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on.
So you've been doing a lot of reporting on this one big beautiful bill, and you're really knowledgeable about everything that's been going on. And there is just it's amazing how fast that I think that this has been able to pass, and how little most people know about it. So I want to go through a few of the kind of big topics within the bill with you to try to, let people know what's going to happen. And I think the first thing that I want to start with is actually the timeline of how this is going to be executed, because they have been able to basically make the good things kind of happen first, or the things that are not going to hurt, the tax cuts and things like that. And the bad stuff, the Medicaid and the SNAP cuts, my understanding is that it's not going to take place until after the midterms in 2026. Can you break down the timeline of how this bill is going to be rolling out?
Yeah, I mean, that's generally right. But when you talk about the good things, you're talking mostly about the extension of the Trump tax cuts. And those are the current tax policy that we have in place right now. So it's really going to be more of an extension of current law. And for a lot of people who don't get overtime, or people who don't, are not tipped workers, they're not going to really see any difference from this bill in terms of their tax liability. There are these temporary tax cuts that I just mentioned: no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on interest on car loans, certain car loans, and no tax or a boosted standard deduction for seniors. Those things are all time limited, and they're actually going to be done by 2028. But there'll be somewhat of an, next year when you're doing your taxes, if you're in one of those categories and maybe a couple others, you will find some differences. Business tax cuts also kick in right away. So if you're a business, Yahoo. But as you said, the many of the social safety net cuts are pushed out a little bit. And some of that was to make it look like they weren't being put into effect right away for political benefit, as you say. That's one of the reasons why we see this, and it also makes those cuts look a little bit cheaper, because we talk in terms of 10-year budget windows when we talk about what these cuts are. And if they don't start for a few years, they may look like they're not as much as the ultimate reality. But if they continue into perpetuity, they end up being much more impactful. So even though we have tremendous numbers in terms of cuts here, $1 trillion to Medicaid, hundreds of billions of dollars to the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or SNAP, those cuts are actually more impactful than even those numbers, because they are delayed and not in effect for the first couple years.
Hope springs eternal that if Democrats get back into office, they kind of take a page from that playbook, instead of, like with the Medicare drug price negotiations, saying that, oh, well, we'll do this over, 10 years, 5 drugs at a time, or whatever it was. Just do all of the good things immediately, and then people will start feeling the good effects of your programs.
It's a really good example, because we still don't have those lower drug prices in effect. The Inflation Reduction Act passed in 2022. We will not see the benefit of those lower drug prices until next year. And there was no kind of mechanical reason for doing that. There wasn't a reason that, oh, it takes time to impose these costs or these new prices. Like, you change a price tag pretty easily.
Right.
The whole reason was that the farm industry wanted a few more years of excess profits, and their allies in the Democratic Party were able to get these things delayed. And so, yes, I think the big lesson is for Democrats that as you go forward, you need to give tangible benefits to people within the time frame that you can use it politically.
Right. And so let's talk about these Medicaid and SNAP cuts. Can you give us the top lines and explain how they achieve the cuts?
Sure. So we can start with Medicaid, but there's one that is sort of true across both of these programs, and that is the addition of work requirements. And we have seen these kinds of things in action before in many states. Arkansas briefly had Medicaid work requirements until there was a court case and they were unable to do it. But for a couple years, they had work requirements in place on Medicaid. And what they found is that most people on Medicaid are actually working. And the goal of these work requirements was not to get more people to work, because at the end of the process with Arkansas, it's not like the workforce had increased to any degree. The goal is to trip people up and get people off the program. So the whole point here is to create a new bureaucracy that people have to comply with on a regular basis, sometimes more than once a year, and make it so that it's hard to not just sign up for Medicaid, but to maintain your coverage and to stay enrolled. And many of the things in the program, when you're talking about cuts, that's what we're talking about. The Congressional Budget Office and other budget analysts look at this and say, okay, this is going to keep people from staying on the plan, or it will stop people from enrolling into the plan. And as a result, we're going to see a lot of people roll off of Medicaid, and that will save money for the government. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. There are other things, including an introduction of cost sharing in Medicaid. So for one of the first times, several programs, if you go in and try to get a doctor's appointment or some other treatment, you're going to have to pay a higher copay. Whereas for most of services in Medicaid, you don't have to pay copays. So that's a new cost that they're just shifting the burden from the government onto the individual. Another big thing is changing something called the provider tax. This was a way that states had used to get more resources, federal resources, into their Medicaid programs. What they would do is they would tax providers, healthcare providers, hospitals, clinics, things like that. But then they would increase the reimbursement rate for those providers. So the providers would pay money in, but also get more money back, and they would essentially break even. But the people paying the money back are a combination of the state and the federal government. So the federal government pays some of that share, and the state ends up getting more money to administer Medicaid. That has been frozen and actually curtailed in this program, in this bill. And, I mean, it's a little gimmicky if you just sort of explain what it is. But in the context of this bill, it just means states are going to get less money for their Medicaid programs. And states don't have more money just sitting around to devote to Medicaid. So the result is going to be cutbacks in the Medicaid program, whether in reimbursement or whether in trying to tighten enrollment or something like that. So all of these things combined, and there are many others in the bill, they have the effect of I believe the number is $1 trillion taken out of the health system, out of Medicaid. And this is coming at a time when a lot of hospitals, a lot of clinics, a lot of providers that accept Medicaid are in crisis. There was a report by an organization that said 1/3 of all rural hospitals are at risk of closing. That's right now. That's before this bill, before the bill. And so after this bill, you take $1 trillion out of the health system, you're going to create more crises. You're going to create more rural hospital closures. And as a result, you're going to add overcrowding into other hospitals that remain. You're going to have more people off coverage. The estimate is 12 million people losing their coverage as a result of this bill. And therefore, when those people go into an emergency room, federal law says you have to treat anyone who comes to the emergency room. So that creates more uncompensated care, and that is borne by the hospitals. So you're creating more of a situation where hospitals have to manage their finances in ways that may be incredibly challenging. And you could see a cascading effect where the lowest hanging fruit, the hospitals that are in crisis, they go away, and that business moves to other hospitals, which then themselves get into crisis. It could mean less access. It could mean more overburdened staff. It could mean if you're trying to get an appointment for a doctor, you might not, maybe you waited 20 days. Now you're going to wait 30 days or 40 days or 50 days. So it's, a lot of times this has been described as, well, this is really a bad thing for rural hospitals. And it is. But I think everyone in the health system is going to feel the effects of this.
Right. And I want to underline a couple of things that you said there that I want to make sure that folks listening don't just gloss over, because we're a few of the stations that we're on are conservative talk radio stations, and so there are hosts on some of the stations that we're on that are constantly, I think frankly misrepresenting what this bill is doing in a really gross way. And you mentioned Arkansas's work requirements; those did not increase the labor force participation rate. I know that you wouldn't know this,
that's right,
David, but a big conversation in Alabama right now is especially around workforce. And that's like part of my job. Like outside of this program, I have a day job and it deals with workforce development. And like everybody, businesses, politicians, educators, everybody is talking about labor force participation rate and how Alabama's is one of the lowest in the country. And Arkansas did not see their labor force participation rate increase when they implemented work requirements, which if we want to think like scientifically, logically, if the hypothesis is there's a bunch of 35-year-olds playing video games in their mother's basement because they have Medicaid, but for some reason, like that's just enough to live on, is you can get health care if you get sick. That didn't push people into the workforce. So we have to try something different. And also, states like California and New York, which obviously have more generous social safety nets, have a higher labor force participation rate than Alabama. So it cannot be that places like Alabama are just too generous, and that's why people are just sitting around at home and not working. There has to be something different that's going on here.
That's right.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's absolutely right. And when you're talking about work requirements within SNAP or the food stamp program, it's the same thing. And so you got to look at what is the ultimate goal here. And if the ultimate goal does not translate into higher labor force participation rate, then you have to say that the ultimate goal is to kick people off of food stamps and Medicaid. And that's what the demonstrable goal, that's what has happened in states that have, even if briefly, imposed these kind of requirements.
And so then I also want to talk a little bit more about the work requirements, just as something that they're highlighting the work requirements to make the people that will get kicked off of Medicaid seem undeserving. But you mentioned this, and I just want to underscore this: the work requirements are paperwork requirements. And, somebody in the chat said that they heard that these work requirements are basically like filing your taxes every month. And I had this conversation on the radio with one of the conservative hosts. And, I was saying that most of the people that were kicked off from Georgia and Arkansas qualified. If you just look at their situation and you look at their requirements, they qualified, but they were not able to properly jump through all of the hoops that they were mandated to jump through. And so then I was like, I was, they replied with like, oh, well, so what? You're just telling me that somebody could get health care and they just didn't fill out a form correctly and they were just satisfied with that and they didn't get health care? And I'm like, how do you respond to people like that when that's kind of their idea is either people that don't qualify, don't deserve it, and then people that do qualify but can't fill out the paperwork or have difficulties filling out the paperwork also deserve not to get it because they're too stupid or lazy or something, even though they're working and meeting all these requirements. I mean, it's been such a frustrating series of conversations that I've had about this.
Absolutely. I mean, the reality is 61% of Americans on Medicaid work. That's according to the Kaiser Family Foundation. A large percentage of those who don't are either disabled or elderly, because one of the largest segments of people on Medicaid are people who use it to get into nursing homes. Right. These are Medicare, Medicaid dual eligibles, people who are over the age of 65 but have no assets and no income other than Social Security, and so they qualify for Medicaid as well. And we have a stupid system in this country where you have to be super poor in order to get into a nursing home if you can't afford it. So you literally have to draw down all your assets in order to qualify. And then the other fraction of people in Medicaid are children. So you're talking about maybe 3% of the entire Medicaid population that actually doesn't have a job and would have the ability to hold one down. It's a very, very small percentage. Yes. And this is not about, it's just not about increasing the workforce. It's about adding red tape to the enrollment system. And we've seen it before. And the way that you know this is that it's only one of many enrollment changes in the program that were put in place in this bill. It's not like everything in this bill is about work requirements. They just took Biden era rules that improved eligibility, improved enrollment, made it easier to get into Medicaid, and they just obliterated them. And that is, they were designed mostly to, simplify the system. And so, there is an increase in bureaucracy, an increase in the tax on people's free time in this bill. And, the reason that work requirements aren't about work is that everything else in this bill aligns with the way that work requirements worked out, in that it just adds red tape to the system.
Exactly. And when you say make it easier to get into Medicaid, I want to underscore for people, that's not that, Biden was able to usher in some radical liberal communist eligibility,
like he just totally
expanded these loopholes.
Make it easier for people who are eligible for Medicaid to get the coverage that they are entitled to. That's the point. Or that they deserve, or that they're eligible for.
And another, we're a union radio program, so we're really focused on worker protections and stuff like this. And so I have seen, I don't know if you've watched the OSHA heat protection hearings in the House, but these conversations are happening as we're talking about increasing paperwork requirements on working people and poor people. And we are trying to make the case, that it is difficult for working people to do paperwork sometimes. And if we don't have to do it, we shouldn't do it. We should make it easy. We should make the government efficient. And at the same time, we're seeing, Republicans just cry about the paperwork requirements that OSHA might put on employers who subject their employees to high heat, and it's just so the heat protection rule is so loose and generous to employers that it's really but you've got at the same time Republicans talking about how hard businesses and multi-billion-dollar corporations have it with these paperwork requirements as they're imposing even worse paperwork requirements on individual poor people. But I want to set that aside for just a second and like let's take a let's just change our frame. Let's say that you and I, David, we believe that people who don't work shouldn't get health care. We further believe that people who can't figure out this paperwork also don't deserve health care because they're lazy and dumb or whatever. Okay.
Right.
This is who we are right now. We think that people don't deserve health care.
Yeah.
This is going to hurt me and you, the deserving people who have jobs and health insurance, because it's going to affect our hospitals, right? Explain the effects that this is going to have to people who don't directly lose Medicaid.
Right. I mean, we mentioned this before, that if a bunch of hospitals close, those patients don't go away. They end up going to other hospitals, and they may be a hospital near you. They may have to travel hours to get to that hospital. They may, in an emergency, not be near a hospital in time to deal with that emergency. But in the end, people are going to want to get their health. They're going to need to get health care. And that's going to clog hospitals. It's going to make wait times longer. It's going to wreck the finances of some of those hospitals and create a cascading effect where your hospital might have to close down because of this. It's going to make insurance probably more expensive, because if there's more uncompensated care at hospitals are going to ask more from insurance companies to pay to cover that. So that they can stay in business. And so it may make your premium more. There are all sorts of ways that this is going to wreck the healthcare system, because the healthcare system is very interconnected. You can't just pull $1 trillion out of the healthcare system and have that only be isolated to, 1 or 2 rural hospitals in America. It's going to affect everybody and everybody's care.
Right. And, I've seen people, there's this one video that Ryan Grimm tweeted out of this Republican congressperson literally smoking a cigar and just waving off, all of these millions of people that are going to lose health care. And it's just, I don't know. It's amazing to me that they're just refusing to acknowledge anything that they're doing. And I don't really...
I'll give you another example. I'll give you another
ahead.
example, Jacob, by the way, because you talked about heat protections and worker protections. There's a key worker protection with regard to healthcare that gets taken out from this bill as well. The Biden administration put in something called the safe staffing rule. And that had to do with a minimum staffing ratio for nursing homes. You would have to have a certain amount of nurses there, a ratio between nurses and residents in those nursing homes. That is going away. And as a result of that going away, nursing homes are going to want to save money, and they're going to have less people caring for your grandmother and your mother in these nursing homes. And so that's another example of how this is going to affect everybody. This is going to, have a dramatic effect on nursing home care in the United States, which was already pretty bad and necessitated the Biden administration to come in and put in the safe staffing rule, which required, I think it was 3 hours of nursing care per resident per day and a registered nurse on site at all times. All of that goes away now.
Let's talk about the broader economic effects, and we've been talking some about this, but I want to talk about jobs. Well, let's talk about the deficit increases first. When pressed on this, the Republican politicians have just said that, the CBO is just they're lib communists and they don't know how to do math somehow, even though it's run by a Republican, and that tax cuts are actually going to generate more growth. And so we will generate more tax revenue that way, right? Because we're going to cut taxes so much that it's going to be a big boost to the business community, and they're going to create more, and all of that's going to trickle down on to you somehow. Are they right? What do you make of this argument?
I mean, on its face, it's ridiculous, right? They're extending the current tax cuts. In one context, they say that doesn't cost any money, right? Because we're just extending the current policy. We're just extending these tax cuts. Doesn't cost anything. With this, in the same breath, they're
really
saying,
quickly,
this will supercharge.
Really quickly, just to make sure that folks understand what you just said there, the whole reason that they were able to do this under reconciliation is because instead of a current law baseline, which the current law is these tax cuts expire, and so extending the tax cuts increases the deficit. They said it's current, that they did a current policy baseline which says that these tax cuts don't cost any money actually, because we're just extending current law. And so, you know, Democrats have responded well, we could just pass Medicare for all for one day and then come back the next day and come back literally the next day and say, oh, we're just extending this forever, and it doesn't cost anything. That's how ridiculous this argument is making. The argument that they are making is procedurally that this doesn't cost anything, but that's this entire house of cards is built on that foundation, and it's so ridiculous, even though it's just a procedural thing, and ultimately it doesn't matter, and it shows how stupid the filibuster is, and that it doesn't actually mean anything if the people... Anyway, so in one breath they're saying it doesn't cost anything. But in the same breath, in the same breath that they say this doesn't cost anything, this is just extending current policy, they say, oh, and also this extension of current policy is going to supercharge growth. It makes absolutely no sense on their own terms. It makes no sense. So the idea that this is going to be this huge growth boost to the economy just makes no sense. In fact, if you increase the deficit by $3.3 trillion over a decade, as this does, what you're going to do is by flooding the economy with that level of money, you're going to either create inflation or force the Federal Reserve to increase interest rates. And interest rate increases are going to be a dampening effect on the economy. It's going to reduce economic growth because you'll have less investment as a result. And, you know, interest on the debt, you know, one of the biggest things that the United States pays in their budget is interest on the debt. Now, we paid more in interest on the debt than we did on the military last year, which is a staggering number. And so this becomes a problem for the greater budget more generally, and means that the amount of services and support that you can give to people who are struggling necessarily kind of weakens. So it's a silly notion that you're going to increase growth through these tax cuts. It didn't actually come true with the 2017 Trump tax cuts. They did not materially increase growth. And the idea that you're going to do this, it's just the same Laffer curve stuff that we've heard since the 1980s, that tax cuts create more money for the federal treasury. It's just not true. Right. And there was actually More Perfect Union did a video about the 2017 tax cuts and the effect that they had on jobs. And they even had Trump talking about how, oh, wow, I'm surprised that they did all of these stock buybacks instead of hiring more people. We didn't put any requirements in the bill because we didn't think that we would have to, because we thought that they would do the right thing for some reason. And so now we're again extending these tax cuts with no requirements to actually invest the money that these companies are getting in America, in American workers. Yeah.
Also with no requirements to actually pay the taxes that are left. I mean, one of the big things in the Biden era Inflation Reduction Act was this huge investment in the IRS. Most of that has been taken away. Doge has gone and crushed the IRS in many ways. And so, you know, the tax code is more of a theory to a lot of rich folks who can find, you know, good accountants and good lawyers to avoid those taxes, having to pay them. So, you know, the kernel of truth here. They say, oh well, CBO doesn't know really what's going to happen, and they're a bunch of liberal Democrats anyway, and their estimates shouldn't be taken as gospel. To the extent that we shouldn't believe the CBO, we probably shouldn't believe the actual tax cuts that will be collected, because we have a broken IRS system that was deliberately broken by the Republicans.
Right. When Biden killed the Keystone XL pipeline, that was something that the unions, at least the unions that were involved in the building of that pipeline, were upset about. And it's something that has continued to be, amazingly, even as objectively under the Biden administration, we saw historic levels of manufacturing investment and construction jobs and all that kind of stuff. But it's been something that conservatives have continued to point to. North America's building trade unions have said that this bill will kill 1,000 times more jobs than closing the Keystone XL pipeline. Not 10 times, not 100 times, 1,000 times more jobs than closing the Keystone XL pipeline. Does that sound right to you? And if yes, how does that happen? Like, what is the mechanism by which these jobs are killed?
Yeah, and it wasn't just the building trades. It was the IBEW and the ironworkers, and basically any industrial union has said that this bill is a catastrophe. And the reason why is that the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act is what generated all of this manufacturing investment, because of the tax credits that it enabled for clean energy projects, for battery storage, for electric vehicles, what have you. Most of those, all of those really, are being taken away in this bill. Those clean energy tax credits, unless you start construction in the next year, those credits are going to go away. And that means that this clean energy leadership that we had just started to build, the competition with China that we were having, and the ability to have an ecosystem around clean energy in the United States, the advanced manufacturing of the future, the thing that we are moving towards inevitably, is taken away in this bill. And to the extent that the tax credits for manufacturing production remain, there is one small tax credit for metallurgical coal, which is the coal used in steel, but it's not even for coal or for steel produced in the United States. It's for metallurgical coal that is shipped abroad to other countries so they can create the steel. So even like the tax credits that remain are essentially for the benefit of outsourcing those jobs. And so industrial unions have rightly said that if you're taking away all of the economies of the future, the industries of the future, you're making it impossible to stand up those industries. You're going to have far less industrial jobs in the United States.
I have been honestly a little bit shocked at the stock market's reaction to this bill, just because I'm seeing all of this coming down the pike. I'm seeing, hundreds of billions of dollars, at least maybe $1 trillion being taken out of the healthcare system. I'm seeing hundreds of thousands of jobs being ended. And it seems to me that even if I were, a member of the capital class, that I would be worried about just the general economic trends that are going to they're going to be coming out of this. What do you make of how the stock market is reacting to this, and how do you think that the economy is going to react 2 years down the road?
Kind of gets back to your first question, the short-term versus long-term effects of this bill. In the short term, rich people are going to get their tax cuts, and a lot of rich people are investors, and they're thinking, hey, I'm going to keep my tax cut, and that's going to be pretty good. There's a lot of business tax cuts that are made permanent in this bill, and that's going to be pretty good for them. They feel like they're going to keep more of their money. So, that's not completely irrational in the short term. The other thing is that the bit that I mentioned there about how unless you get your clean energy production done in the first year, you're going to lose your tax credit. That could create a rush of investment activity in the first year, between now and next July 4th, essentially. So that could be a short-term boost to the economy. And what we know is that the stock market kind of relies on short-termism, and they deal with the long-term later. So I'm not totally surprised the stock market is reacting favorably. That also could be because of other measures. I think the tariffs are a big question for investors, and maybe they're seeing positive signs there. So it's not a huge surprise, but I think if you look at every economic analysis that has been put out about this bill, they show that it will make America poorer, that we will have higher interest costs, that we will have a slower growing economy, and in the long term, that the effects of this will be very damaging on the United States, to say nothing of being damaging on the most vulnerable people in the United States.
We've gone a little long, David. I appreciate your time. If you've got 5 more minutes, I think I want to end with this, and because it is so important, and is one of the things that I'm really actually like concerned about it. That one of the things that kind of sticks in my stomach a little bit, and that's the changes that this bill makes to immigration enforcement. Can you give us the top lines of that and explain what that might mean for people across the country?
Sure. So this bill adds $170 billion for immigration enforcement and immigration operations generally. A lot of that goes to building the border wall and to various security measures at the border. But there is $30 billion in increase to the ICE budget, which is about triple their annual budget. There's another $45 billion for the building of detention centers, which could rise from maybe 40,000 beds available for detention to something like 115,000. So, I live here in Los Angeles, and we've seen these ICE raids unrelenting for about a month. They're coming to a city near you. The Immigrations and Customs Enforcement will have much more ability to do ongoing raids all over the country. They become, in this bill, the largest law enforcement operation in American history. The ICE budget will now be as big as the budgets of some national militaries around the world. So it's going to have much more capacity to engage in these reigns of terror that we've seen all over the country. Arresting, kidnapping people, essentially, putting them in unmarked vehicles, not necessarily based on their citizenship, but based on, some form of racial profiling, essentially, and, taking these people, detaining these people, and shipping them out of the country to any third country that they choose, now that the Supreme Court has blessed that. So it's a real problem, and we're going to see this really aggressive, punitive, and terrorizing immigration enforcement that we've seen in smaller quantities before, but we're going to see in much larger quantities now.
Yeah, it really is concerning what this is going to do to people, what this is going to do to communities, and I mean, I can only hope that we see an even stronger reaction than what we saw to the first Trump term. Trump's treatment of immigrants back in 2017 really, liberalized people towards immigration, and it seems like there's been a backlash towards the liberalization, and so maybe there will be a backlash to that backlash. I don't know, but what looks like is coming down the pike seems so much worse than what happened in 2017. And so I'm very concerned about how people are going to be treated. Obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on it. Folks should read the American Prospect. Read the news first. If you want to see what the New York Times and the Washington Post is going to be reporting on, you should read the American Prospect. David, tell folks where they can find you.
Yeah, we're at prospect.org. We publish daily there about ideas, politics, and power. And we have a magazine that we put out, a print magazine, 6 times a year. We have weekly YouTube shows on Fridays afternoons at 12:30. We have newsletters that you can get the news delivered right to your mailbox. So kind of full spectrum stuff. And you can find all that information at prospect.org.
Thank you so much. David Dayen, Executive Editor of the American Prospect. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We're going to head into the second half of the program now. Overtime, we're going to be talking to Chuck Corra of Apod Latcha. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. We're going to go ahead and open the phone lines. 844-899-TVLR is the number, 844-899-8857. If you would like to call in, you can do so now. And we're going to head into overtime, but if you don't follow us online, that's going to be Facebook and YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and you're just listening to us on the radio, then I guess we will see you next week. All right. We're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. Like I said, we got a great overtime lined up for you. Going to be some good stuff. Going to go ahead and open up the phone lines, 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 if you'd like to call in. And we're going to take a break. Be right back.
Studio web interface. Workers, good news to you, I'll tell how the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party
Okay. All right. This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. The phone number, if you'd like to call in, is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Because we didn't get to it in the first half of the program, we're going to go ahead and take a look at Boss Watch, see how bosses broke the law in the South last week. Over in Georgia, First Franklin Financial Corporation, a consumer lender with more than 370 branches throughout the southern United States, violated federal law by discriminating against a class of employees when it denied them reasonable accommodations and then fired them because of their disabilities. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission charged in a lawsuit. According to the lawsuit, First Franklin has denied reasonable accommodations to its employees with disabilities since 2022 and offered no alternative accommodations, including when its employees requested leave as an accommodation. The EEOC's complaint charged that a former customer service representative had multiple medical conditions contributing to heart attacks requiring hospitalization. He requested a short leave of absence until he expected to be released from the hospital, but the company denied the request and terminated him. Could you imagine being in the hospital and being like, hey, I'm literally in the hospital. Can I have a leave of absence? And they say no, and also you're fired. That's crazy. Such alleged conduct violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, which requires reasonable accommodations of disabilities and prohibits employers from discharging an employee because of their disability or because they engaged in protected activity. So the EEOC filed suit in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia, Atlanta Division, after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement via its conciliation process. The EEOC is seeking back pay, front pay, compensatory damages, and punitive damages for the defendants' former employees, as well as injunctive relief to prevent future discrimination. Staying in Georgia, Action Insulation Company, a general contractor specializing in insulation, installation, and asbestos abatement located in Port Wentworth, Georgia, violated federal law by subjecting its office manager to sexual harassment by its owner, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission charged in a lawsuit. The EEOC alleges that Action Insulation's owner, who is also its founder and chief executive officer, subjected the female office manager to sexual harassment, including by making unwanted sexual comments and jokes, showing her lewd photographs, slapping her buttocks, pulling her hair, and otherwise touching her in an unwanted manner. The agency asserts the office manager resisted the owner's advances and complained twice to her supervisor, but the company failed to take any action to stop the harassment. According to the EEOC, the office manager was left with no choice but to resign after the harassment escalated to physical assault. Such conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits sexual harassment in employment. The EEOC filed suit in its U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Georgia, Savannah Division, after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its conciliation process. The EEOC did not say what sort of things they are seeking from the lawsuit. Workers die on the job every day in the United States, 100 workers every week, but frustratingly, most of these deaths are preventable. Even though they're preventable, a lot of them are often not investigated due to underfunding of OSHA, and often the community doesn't even know that somebody has died on the job. Even though OSHA is even more hamstrung than before, there are sometimes a small news story whenever somebody dies at work, and so the Confined Space newsletter, set up by Jordan Barab, a former OSHA official, compiles as many of these news stories on worker deaths as they can find every week. In addition to this newsletter, they regularly host commentary and analysis pieces on labor and workplace workplace safety. You can find it all at jordanbarab.com/confined space. This week they found 43 stories of deaths on the job, including 15 from the South. A couple of lowlights. In Dallas, Texas, a postal worker died Saturday while working in the Dallas area, marking the second death of a North Texas U.S. Postal Service worker in recent years. Jacob Taylor, 51, was pronounced dead around 5:30 p.m. And the cause of death is pending, according to the Dallas County Medical Examiner. It's not clear if Taylor's death was heat-related, although Saturday's temperatures had reached into the 90s. Taylor's death comes roughly 2 years after another USPS letter carrier, Eugene Gates, died while working in extreme heat. His cause of death was confirmed to be heat and heart disease. OSHA later fined USPS more than $15,000, and the incident led to calls for the Postal Service to equip its vehicles with air conditioning. Last year, a UPS delivery driver fainted from alleged heat exhaustion and crashed his vehicle while working one afternoon when the weather had risen up to 102 degrees. In Tuscaloosa, an investigation is underway after an accidental electrocution on Monday inside the city's B.F. Goodrich tire manufacturing plant killed a worker there. Captain Jack Kennedy, the commander of the Tuscaloosa Violent Crimes Unit, confirmed to The Thread, the outlet reporting on this, that they are assisting an investigation into the circumstances of the accident, but stressed this is not a criminal investigation. Kennedy said on June 22nd, 2025, an employee at the B.F. Goodrich manufacturing plant in Tuscaloosa was transported to DCH and then to UAB for life-threatening injuries. The employee was exposed to high-voltage electricity and suffered severe injuries. At this time, June 25th, 2025, the patient is not expected to survive. The victim has been identified as Jeremy Waltrip, who suffered the electrocution. You can read more on the Confined Space newsletter. And this segment of Boss Watch, Union Busters, covering national updates, is sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that union busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. Here are the new filings from this week. Tootsie's Entertainment in Tennessee hired Government Resources Consultants of America and East Coast Labor Relations. NASCO in Illinois hired CACR Labor Education Services. Ocean State Job Lot in Rhode Island hired East Coast Labor Relations. Bicon Services in Ohio hired Labor Management Consultants. Integrity Painting and Decorating in Illinois hired Santana International. Workers lost that union election, but objections were filed. And Amazon in Illinois hired Compliance and Policy Consulting. If we missed any bad boss stories, you can let us know those as well at tvlr.fm/contact. We'd love to be able to add more to this small segment. So, yeah, let us know. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. You can also call in there. We do have a caller on the line, so let's go ahead and bring them on the air. This caller is from a 317 area code. 317 area code. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, y'all. I'm a Teamster out of the Heartland.
Teamster out of the Heartland. Yeah, that's fine. Teamster out of the Heartland. What's on your mind?
One of the things I'm really grappling with. I've been involved with movement work most of my life, and I've been involved in labor activism and organizing since about 2016. I've worked with SEIU, Unite Here. I'm now a Teamster, and I've just lately had to, since this re-election, since this, like onslaught of, the Trump onslaught and everything that they've done with Doge and the immigration stuff, I really had to retool some of my assumptions about people and about organizing, and I'm really grappling with how do you organize in a world where people are delighted with such cruelty, and that's our union brothers and sisters too.
Yeah.
That's, not just the boss, as a Teamster, we've had a little addendum to your guys' Boss Watch thing. That Teamster that passed out on the road, his center manager was a center. In that same center, Chris Begley died. I think it was the year before, and a part-timer died that same year that Chris Begley was died of a heat injury. And in her previous center, a worker went down from heat on his way home and wrecked his car, and will never be right. He'll never drive a UPS package car again. He'll never ride his motorcycle again. This center manager is still a center manager at UPS, even though we have 4 very serious recorded heat deaths and injuries.
Yeah.
That was her responsibility. And within the union, you hear guys talking about, oh, well, it's your responsibility to know when you need to pull the truck over, when you need to, and they're talking this personal responsibility stuff, and they're blaming it on their brothers and their sisters. So, it's not just that our brothers and sisters are delighting in this cruelty when it comes to immigration, but they are taking this personal responsibility line. So I don't know that they can stick their head in the sand or something like that. But for me, as an activist, as an organizer, I'm just not sure how to go forward in a world where we don't care about each other. So that's what I got.
That's a big one to tackle. I really appreciate your call, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I think what you're speaking to is something a lot of people are experiencing right now. I think a lot of activists and organizers are feeling like you're feeling right now. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I'm interested in, if you want to stay on the line, I'm interested in your response to some of my thoughts. I've been having a lot of those, a lot of similar thoughts, specifically around the immigration stuff. I mean, that the stuff that you're talking about that brother in Texas is in a sense even more difficult, I would imagine, to grapple with, because at least with the immigration stuff, you can say that like people have kind of been deluded into seeing immigrants as not the same kind of people, or deluded into believing this idea that all undocumented immigrants are criminals and things like that. But I've been, ruminating on this stuff with immigration recently, because I've been, I grew up very religious. I'm not religious anymore, but I've been trying to, I've been wanting to go back to church, and I've gone back to church a few times, and I'm thinking about going back to church regularly. And, I remember, I grew up conservative, right? A Pentecostal type of denomination, and everyone was conservative, and everybody was generally like opposed to illegal immigration or whatever, but it was always still done with like a solemn sort of attitude, and like we want, we don't believe that illegal immigration should be permitted, and we do need to crack down on it, but like we can understand why somebody would want to cross the border, quote unquote, illegally, and I would probably do the same thing. We just can't, we can't have that, right? And so like we want to deal with it humanely, but we do need to stop it. And I was always kind of like, that's a little, I don't know, it seems like maybe the humanity should extend further, but at least there's like a recognition that these people are human in that attitude. And there's been so much, like you said, I mean, just cruelty literally making memes about people crying as they are torn from their families. And the only kind of solace that I've been able to take with that is that, you know, like I mentioned with David as we were wrapping up, that there was such a backlash against Trump's anti-immigrant actions and rhetoric in the first term that the country really liberalized on immigration. And I can only hope that is going to happen again and in a more sustained way and sustainable way, because what we're talking about now is so much worse than it was before. And so maybe it will push people to, after this is over, be more humane and sustainably so. Because, and you know, I remember there was an undocumented immigrant who got DACA, who, for one reason or another, I think this was back in like 2015, there was concern that her and her family were going to be deported. And she was sort of intermingled in this Pentecostal type community that I was a part of. And, you know, they put out a call on their church's like communication system. Like, we want you to get down and pray right now for so-and-so because she's worried she's going to be deported. Right. And this was a peer of mine, somebody my age. And I just thought, like, how beautiful that is, that there's this, you know, there's this rural church, you know, that was that was willing to do that for somebody because they know that, right? They know that person. And the, you know, when you know these people, you won't be affected by the lies that Trump is putting out, because it is a lie that undocumented immigrants are all criminals and they're hurting people and things like this, right? And so when this comes down and you do see it start to affect people in their communities, there is going to be a backlash, and people are going to want to save the people that they are in community with. And so I think that building community is going to be the thing. And, you know, I mean, we've been, even as bad as things are right now, America has been in worse places before, and we have progressed. I mean, as bad as things are right now, they're not, it's not as bad as it has been. And so, you know, I mean, it's very hard to understand how people can kind of be so cruel. But I don't know, you know, I think that building community and relationships is the thing that's going to bring us out of it, if anything does. But I don't know. I mean, and that's because what else can you do? What else can people like you and I do? Right? Like, the other answer is giving up, and we can't do that. So, you know, I don't know. What do you make of that, brother?
Well, I mean, I think, it sort of baffles me, because, you know, I was raised, Christian as well. Not, I was raised Episcopal, which is a bit of a different context, than you, but, you know, I mean, what of the traveler? What of the sojourner? What of the downtrodden? You know, that's what I thought, you know, I was raised to show my faith through service. And I'm just wondering, where did that go? Yeah. You know, where did the Catholic movements that, you know, broke into the FBI's office and exposed, you know, their, you know, dirty trick? What happened to Christians of conscience, right? It seems like Christianity is so moored to this type of cruelty that we're seeing now, and I'm just wondering, like, you know, how do you square that circle? Because there's just such a disconnect from Christian social doctrine, and what these MAGA people are doing. And I mean, I think honestly, what we have to do is we have to go find every person of moral conscience and get together with them, regardless of if you have a moral conscience, you know, if you see what's going on and you think that it's wrong, we have to be together with those people. And for everybody else, I don't think we can, appeal to people like that on a moral standpoint, So there's just going to be some people who cruelty is the order of the day, and that's going to be them for the rest of their lives. And we have to deal with those people from a position of strength. No appeal to these people. We're going to have to assert our politics.
Yeah.
Over these people, but that's going to take every single one of us. My politics are far left. Okay. And I don't believe in the Democratic Party being the way out, right? But we're going to still need to support people like Zoran Mamdani, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to go door knock? Am I going to go door knock with my local DSA to try and get a progressive Democrat, elected? Absolutely not. Am I going to pack meals for them and help do childcare for them while they're doing that? Hell yes. And so I think that there's a way that we all need to show up for each other.
Yeah.
And we need to put aside some of these, Now I'm not talking about we need to vote for Gavin Newsom or Amy Klobuchar, one of these neoliberal freaks, right? But you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I think the only way going forward is to just collect every single one of us who every single one of us who still believes in human rights, whether they are a conservative, a liberal, a socialist, a communist, and we all need to get together and we all need to say, where can we work together? Because it's going to take every single one of us to surmount these people who are just not going to be moved by the fact that we're all human beings. And just, free Gaza, free Palestine, death to tyrants.
Appreciate the call. Thank you, Heartland Teamster. Appreciate it.
Yeah. There's a lot more I'd say on that, but I know we got our guest on the line, and I think it just takes all of us doing what we can so that we can win what we really need and what we deserve as a better world. And that massive people power is our way out of this, building a mass working class movement. And I agree with the sentiments. We've really got to find people who respect that shared humanity. And, Reverend William Barber talks about the need for a moral revival in this country. And, regardless of your faith or spiritual traditions or perspectives, I think he's on to something there. I think we need a true revival of morality when it comes to our shared humanity and our respect for other people. Appreciate the call.
We've got another caller on the line, and I think I know who it is. I want to bring them on before we get to Chuck. Sorry about that. I just sent you an email, Chuck, so you should have that. We should be bringing you on here momentarily, but I wanted to get to this caller because I think I know what it's about, and I want to try to talk about it. This caller is from a 267 area code. 267 area code. What's your name, and where are you calling from?
Adam and Jacob, Infinite Content from Philadelphia. Oh, you all know what I'm calling about, but
I do know what you're calling about. Tell us about it. Tell us about it. What's going on in Philly?
Okay. So we've got a massive strike. DC 33, which is the AFSCME District Council for 33, which represents all municipal workers in the city of Philadelphia, are currently on strike. That means you can't go to the library, you can't go to the pool, you can't go file your taxes, and more importantly, it's just the middle of July. There is no trash pickup. The trash workers are on, the sanitation workers are on strike.
Right.
And I went through this about 40 years ago when I was a kid. This is going to turn out bad. And some people don't understand how bad it's going to turn out because hot garbage in the streets of Philadelphia in the dog days of summer. Now, they have drop-off sites where you can't take your trash, which is fine if you happen to live a couple blocks away from one. But what if you don't have a vehicle?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And drop-off sites 6 blocks away.
Yeah, and the union has also said that they would consider taking stuff to the drop-off sites scabbing unless it's to the drop-off site right next to the mayor's mansion. So it's just
yeah. Well, and I had to explain to people, if you're taking your trash to the drop-off site, that's not scabbing because they aren't picking in front of the drop-off sites. You're picking downtown and at libraries and other places where you will get services from the city. Why would you pick in front of the trash dump? That is not scabbing. That's making sure that your city doesn't have a public health crisis arise. Secondly, the teachers union has authorized to strike at the end of August if no contract is guaranteed.
Oh wow!
So there's so you have the potential of having not only the municipal employees but also the teachers also being on strike. I mean, the city's already in a bad state now. It will be absolutely shut down if the school district doesn't open after Labor Day. And on top of that, SEPTA, which is the regional transit agency, has just proposed a budget for massive service cuts and increase in fare. And they're talking about trying to cut service off at 9 p.m. for a lot of routes, which I'm like, how does that help people who work second shifts and overnight shifts, like work in hospitals and health centers and all other types of agencies? What were they going to do? Just have to leave out their house at 6 p.m. so they can get to work at 11 p.m.? That's not going to work. And then what happens when you get up at 11 p.m.? We're supposed to just stay overnight at the job or pay an exorbitant amount for a cab or Uber or Lyft to get yourself home? Like I said, all these things are dovetailing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely. And it is worth noting and shouting out LL Cool J and Jasmine Sullivan. They dropped out of a concert that they were going to do. What?
Oh yeah, nobody. Remember, LL Cool J is part of the Screen Actors Guild.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
People will get that. He's an actor, so he's not going to cross the picket line. And him performing would be considered crossing the picket line. I respect that. And it hit me yesterday afternoon. I was like, why is LL Cool J did? I'm like, oh, he is an actor. So that makes sense. Now, I did want to just touch real brief on the big budget bill. And you know what happens when you cut Medicaid and SNAP? That's going to affect revenue for all the businesses that accept SNAP benefits because they count that as revenue and money going into their pocket.
Right.
So
grocery stores and the hospitals and on and on.
Yeah, like I said, the domino effect to this is going to be beyond horrific, and it's going to, like I said, it only takes a minute for a house to collapse. It takes years to build it back up, and it's going to take at least 3 to 4 congressional cycles at least to get this back to halfway near zero. Because the disaster that's coming from this, people aren't going to understand it until it maturely affects them. Like when you start having hospitals closed, regional health centers closed, and like people starving, and we don't even want to talk about the other reason why people might be starving, because there's still people picking crops or what have you. But like I said, I'm trying to fit a lot in. I know you got somebody got an interview, so I'll give you a call next week and keep you all abreast throughout the week with text and what have you. Okay?
Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
All right, y'all. All there.
Yep. Reading this from NBC 10 Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, sanitation workers make $39,000 to $42,000 a year, which comes out to about $18 to $20 an hour. According to research out of MIT, the living wage for a Philadelphia family with one child is approximately double that amount. They need to make nearly $39 an hour to maintain a normal standard of living, according to the city. That really is, when I saw that, a lot of them only made $19 an hour. I was shocked. Because how do you get away with in Philadelphia, as high as the cost of living is there, only paying your garbage men? I mean, like, garbage men in Huntsville, Alabama make more than that. That's crazy. How do you get away with paying people so little money? And so that's how much that they ask, and the union is not even asking to double the rate of pay, which would probably, frankly, be justified. I would be interested in knowing, what does the average cop in Philadelphia make, for instance. But DC 33 has asked for an annual pay increase of 5%. The city is offering the union a 2.75% increase this year and 3% increases over the next 2 years. Prices in Philadelphia's metro area are up 2.9% over the last year, according to the Consumer Price Index. So 2.75% increase, less than inflation. The city of Philadelphia is offering these folks a pay cut of 0.25%, even as they already only make $40,000 a year. Just pathetic. Absolutely pathetic to see this kind of stuff from the city of Philadelphia. And all solidarity with the workers, obviously. And, they deserve everything that they're asking for, and then more, and then a little bit more than that, and then some more than that. Let's go ahead and get to our guest. Chuck Corra is a host of Apod Latcha. Apod Latcha is a podcast and media project about about news, politics, culture in Appalachia. Chuck, welcome back. I think we've had you on the program before. Chuck, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. I appreciate you taking the time, and sorry for getting to you a little late.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me back. And I do believe I've been on once before to talk about JD Vance.
That's
so,
right. Yes.
Happy to be back.
So, you recently, for Apod Latcha, did an accent project. I want you to talk a little bit about that and explain what it is and why you did it. And one of the things that you asked people to do is to say Appalachia. And so tell me first, am I saying it right? And then tell me about the project.
Yeah, so I have a very controversial position, which is I'm not going to judge somebody with how they say it anymore. I've grown from that position, and I know that people have a lot of very strong opinions on that. I understand it. I say it Appalachia. I think that there is historical precedent for that based on its origins with the Appalachia tribe. I won't get into all that right now, but there are a lot of people that say it differently, and that's totally fine. The reason why I did the accent project. So what I did is I used the network of people that we had through our social media and everything else that we've cultivated over the years, and asked people to just submit a voice memo of them saying a quick prompt. I wrote out a short script that said, "This is my Appalachian accent. This is how I say Appalachia." And I asked people to just send us an email and see what we could get. And, I had no idea that we would get over 1,500 responses, which was crazy. And throughout all 13 states in the Appalachian region, we got almost every one of the 423 counties in the ARC, the Appalachian Regional Commission counties. And the reason why I wanted to do this is, so I've been doing this show and had this media platform for a little over 5 years. And one of the things that we've heard from many people is that, so they grew up having an accent, and they were often told that they needed to get rid of it or suppress it or hide it in order to excel in life or to be taken seriously in a professional environment, to not be looked at as dumb or uneducated or ignorant. And I think that that's a real shame, because there's nothing wrong with having an accent. It's something that you should be proud of. It's something that you should value. And it's a cultural signifier of where you come and who you are. And so one of the things that I hope to accomplish with this was to I think, destigmatize, if that's the word. I don't know if it is, but I'm going to say that it is. To destigmatize and normalize having an accent, and to show people that there is real beauty in it and that there's nothing wrong with it. And it doesn't mean that you're dumb or ignorant. It just means that you're a normal person from one of these places. And so I was able to compile over 1,500 of them from all across the region, including Alabama, and put them together into one large compilation, which is available on our YouTube channel. And it was really interesting. I mean, there's so much variation just even between counties upon counties in Appalachia and places like West Virginia, Alabama, Pennsylvania, and the way that people pronounce Appalachia and the way that they just have different inflections. So it was really, really fascinating. It was something that I'm really proud of that we've done.
Yeah. Was there any, what were some of the, I don't know, any interesting observations come out of that accent project? Like, you know, yeah, what were some general thoughts on it after having done it?
So one of the things I found most interesting is that there definitely can be some variation between counties. Different people sound differently, even if they're from the same county. Now, maybe they're a transplant or somebody that maybe has lived there longer than somebody else, but there's always variation. And the one thing that I found interesting, and the whole reason I wanted the prompt to say Appalachia is because I wanted to compare how people pronounced it. And I put together a map based on counties and pronunciations at one point. It's somewhere available on our social media, where it just maps out like the different pronunciation of Laisha versus Latcha. And you can see a very clear distinction between Central Appalachia being more Latch and Southern and Northern Appalachia being Lay. And I found that interesting. I don't necessarily have an explanation for why that is, but it's just interesting how that regional pronunciation and dialect can change based on where you are in the region and what people consider to be Appalachia versus what is more like cultural versus the government defined part of the region.
Your, you know, this accent project is really pretty emblematic, I think, of your project as a whole. You know, you do a podcast, you do different media stuff, you're on like social media and you know, talking about culture and commentary and politics within Appalachia. I guess how would you describe Apod Latcha as a project, and what are you hoping to do with that as a vehicle?
Yeah, I mean, it's evolved over the years. It started, and I guess you could say it still is. The reason what we wanted to do is we wanted to start a podcast, and now kind of turn into a media platform to be a counter narrative to what was the negative stereotypes about Appalachia, but also just the notion that the region is nothing but just right-wing politics and people. I think that there's a lot more nuance to the region of Appalachia than what maybe the mainstream media portrays it as, or just people's general idea of what the region is. I think there's a lot of assumptions and generalizations about Appalachia. And I think that there's a lot of stories that deserve to be told. And so we approach it from a progressive leftist perspective. And that's something that I think was very much missing from that conversation, especially in 2019 and late 2019 when we started the show, but even still now, where you don't see a lot of those voices being amplified from Appalachia. And that's something that we've tried to do. And I've tried to highlight really important people from the region or who are talking about the region and show that there are diverse voices from Appalachia that are not just the archetype of people that I think are commonly generalized as being from the region. And so that's what I've tried to do with it. We've highlighted really important voices. We've talked about important issues, and we've shown that like this region is not a monolith. It's not just a bunch of, you know, right-wing MAGA people. It's very complex. And I think that we've tried to show that throughout the 5 years of our existence. And that's what I've been hoping to continue doing and just building on the platform that we've created.
Right. Well, now for some of the less fun stuff. You know, this one big beautiful bill passed last week. It's been signed into law. You're in Tennessee. You're from Appalachia. I can't remember if you're originally from Tennessee. But, you know, what are people in your neck of the woods saying about this bill? You know, regular folks, politicians, media figures. What's some of the feedback that you're hearing?
Yeah. So I'm originally from West Virginia, and that's where a lot of my family lives. And I live in Tennessee now. I live in the Appalachian part of East Tennessee, and this bill is terrible. It's not good, and I shouldn't say a bill anymore. It was signed into law yesterday, so it's a law. It is law in this country. And you asked about the politicians. So a lot of the politicians, they're at least outwardly for it because either they genuinely support it or they have to support it because it's backed by Donald Trump. And that's what the political people are saying in this region and what they voted. I mean, Tennessee and West Virginia's senators all voted for it. I believe their entire congressional delegations voted for it, except for I think Tennessee has one Democrat that didn't vote for it. But it's really scary because the people. So you asked about how the people are viewing this, and I would say that from the folks I've talked to, most people didn't know about this bill until very late in the game. Very, very late in the game. And that I think is, I would fault, honestly, the Democrats a lot for that. I think they should have been talking about this and doing a lot more to really get this into the conscience of people earlier. Because one of the biggest, I think, most devastating parts of this new law is the cuts to Medicaid. And Medicaid, I mean, for people that just don't really know, it's the single largest health insurance program in the United States. It covers 71 million low-income, disabled, and elderly U.S. residents. And I think one thing that is particularly troubling is that I believe like a lot of people in the region and just throughout the country don't necessarily know that this is going to impact them. Like, for example, in Tennessee, the program that is administered by the state is called TennCare. So if you're on TennCare, you might not realize that that's actually Medicaid.
Right.
Because I mean, it's not all completely Medicaid, but some of it is Medicaid. And so you might not realize you're on Medicaid. You're on TennCare. Or like, I think in Connecticut, it's called Husky Care or something like that. In California, it's like Medi-Cal. So a lot of states have different names for their programs. That's like one kind of little quirky issue that I think has been really troubling for people to understand the impact it has on them. But I mean, I've seen estimates anywhere from like 11 to 17 million people could lose their coverage within the next 5 to 10 years on Medicaid. And these are people that desperately need it. This is something where, like, just to put it in perspective, Medicaid covers half of all U.S. births. It pays for the care of 6 in 10 nursing home residents. And like this bill over the time, I've seen estimates where it's going to cut over time, like close to $1 trillion in cuts to the program. Now that to me is insane. And I think the biggest impact it's going to have on Appalachia. This is a region where we rely on rural hospitals. It's a region that's a very rural region. And even before this new bill was signed into law, we already had huge problems with rural hospital closures, especially in Tennessee. They were closing all the time in Tennessee.
Right.
This is going to exacerbate that tremendously because Medicaid pays for rural hospitals a lot. That's a big, huge part of how rural hospitals survive. And this is just going to be absolutely devastating for that and devastating for so many people that are on this program. They're benefiting from it and are going to have such a devastating awakening when they realize they're no longer going to be covered.
It really is concerning how little attention there was on this in the media, I think, until like the last week, until basically the bread was buttered, so to speak. And like there just wasn't much from state level Democrats here in Alabama talking about it. Even though, the AFL-CIO, I was in some calls where the AFL-CIO was trying to do a bunch of communication around this, and they had Tupperville as a target for this in the Senate because he is going to be governor of Alabama probably in 2026. I don't know if you knew that, Chuck, but very bad, very concerned
Lord
about.
have mercy.
Yeah, very concerned about that. He's announced that he's not running for re-election in the Senate. He is running for governor of Alabama, and the guy who had been like his entire career trying to become governor of Alabama, the current lieutenant governor, Will Ainsworth, almost immediately announced that he wasn't going to be running He would be, abstaining and endorsing Tuberville, which is, I mean, you wouldn't know, but Will Ainsworth is really, really bad. And I would much prefer Ainsworth be governor because, like, Ainsworth is, he knows some things, and Tuberville is just so dumb, and he has he has shown zero interest in even just understanding things in the Senate. Every time that he goes
just learning,
every time that he goes viral, or anytime that he ever talks, it's all just talking points, and like there's nothing about how he wants to bring home good things for working people in Alabama. And at least, Ainsworth is always talking about expanding the interstate or whatever. And it's like, well, we should really probably be talking about something different, like transit or something like that. But at least he's got ideas and he's competent. And I'm just so concerned about Tuberville being up. But anyway, I'm sorry, I got off on the wrong track. They were targeting Tuberville because he's going to be governor of Alabama in 2026, and he's going to have to deal with the fallout from this. And still, we couldn't. He didn't move. And I don't know. How do you think that? What do you think that folks like you and me and unions and maybe rank and file Democrats or rank and file progressive voters? How can we make, out the institutions that are supposed to be opposed to these sorts of things more active in opposing these sorts of things?
Man, that's a $1 million question. So I'm with you in that I think that I have a theory as to like why they were behind the eight ball. I truly think that there were a lot of Democrats that believed that this wasn't going to go anywhere because of the Medicaid cuts, because the Medicaid, like cuts to Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare have always been viewed as like a third rail in American politics. It's something you just don't do because they're so incredibly unpopular. And this administration, Trump in general, in his first term in now, has shown time and time again that you can violate any type of norm in American politics and still survive it. I mean, and if they have not learned this rule yet, then I don't know I don't think they're ever going to learn it. And this is one of the most, I think this is the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. This is one of the most catastrophic bills I think I've ever seen in our lifetime. And I just don't really understand why there was not a larger sense of urgency. I mean, there's a huge sense of urgency about a Muslim socialist winning a Democratic primary for New York City, but for this, not so much. And so I think that I really think that it's incumbent upon people to really communicate like what the source of these issues are, because like we're going to see the catastrophic impact of this in the next like few years. And I think the danger of it though is that some of these cuts are going to come into effect when Trump is out of office.
Yep.
And there very well could be a Democrat in office, and the Democrats will get blamed for those cuts no matter what. That's just how politics works. And honestly, there's probably parts of this bill that are designed in order to do that. And so I really think that people need to be relentless with how they hold, especially Democrats' feet to the fire, and not be accepting of just the norms and status quo anymore. Because look, I've come really, I think my views have evolved on this, because I used to be more of a, move the ball forward, progress. We need incremental progress is fine kind of person. But like, I just don't think that it's really good enough anymore. And sorry, my dog is talking in her sleep in the background. So if you hear a woof, that's what that is. And so I think that there just has to be tremendous amount of public pressure. I really think that this is unconscionable that this is allowed to pass in a United States Congress that is this divided. I really it is unconscionable that this is allowed to pass. This is the margins in this Congress are razor thin. And here's the other thing. Like, I don't believe, I could be wrong on this, so don't quote me, but I believe there's at least one member of Congress who died in office, a Democrat, Jerry Connolly.
I thought there was like 4.
I think there is. I can't remember. I know that his seat is not filled yet. I don't know if the other ones are filled. I'm not positive. I don't think they are. but there's been at least 3 or 4. Sylvester Turner was another one. And if any one of them had been able to vote, they could have voted down this bill.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole other conversation of like this. We have a problem with gerontocracy in that party, but we also have a problem of like, we need people that are going to be like harder fighters and be able to be better communicators in the party to actually communicate to the people like the absolute unmitigated disaster of the policies that are being passed. Like I truly believe that this is one of the most catastrophic bills that has ever passed the Congress in our, at least in my lifetime. Like not in the life of Congress. Like, look, the Fugitive Slave Act was like categorically one of the worst things ever. But it is just, it's so disheartening, but you can't give up, because if you give up, it's going to get worse. And especially if you give up, it's like the people that stand to lose the most, the working poor. They're the ones that lose the most from this bill, from this new law. And they're the ones who need people fighting for them now. And I think that institutions like unions are really important in this fight, because unions are an important resource on the left, certainly, that can organize and get results better than some other institutions. But I also think that I think that more people, I think that there needs to be more leaders that inspire hope in people. I would say that too, because I think that part of the issue is that there's just such a motivation gap in the activist organizer space right now, because they're just seeing like Democrats not being able to stop this, or just not being inspired by this. I do think that Zoran Mamdani is a exception to that, because I do think that he inspired a lot of people. And so I hope that there's more individuals like him that can inspire people across the country. But I don't know. I really think that the pressure needs to be amplified on the opposition party, and in that case is the Democrats right now, because this is just, I don't think people appreciate just how bad this new law is.
Yeah. It's really gonna be bad. There was something that you've talked about on your program and on social media before, is some of the like attitude that people outside of the South and outside of Appalachia have towards the people here, because of how many of them vote. And when I originally reached out, I had noted that, I haven't been seeing just a whole lot of sort of screw them attitude this go round, at least in the last week or so. I did sort of as the bill was beginning to be proposed, but I saw something last week. There's a reporter, Matt McDermott, on Twitter saying that Curtis is a small town of 900 people in rural southwest Nebraska. It's not Appalachia, but it's kind of a, the dynamic is similar. Curtis is a small town of 900 people in rural southwest Nebraska. The Curtis Medical Center announced yesterday that it is closing after more than 30 years. It is the only healthcare provider in the community. They blame Trump's Medicaid cuts. And now I'm not totally sure exactly why that. I mean, maybe it's just because they're already so, they're running on such thin margins now that they can't make it. Yeah, I don't know, because the Medicaid cuts don't kick in until like the end of 2026. So I is that true? You'd have to check the reporting. But anyway, this guy quote tweeted him with how how the community voted, and it was like 87% of the people that voted for Trump. And Nathan Robinson, editor-in-chief of Current Affairs, said that you can respond to this by concluding that these people deserve to be screwed by Trump, or by asking why the Democrats have failed so badly that people would rather be eaten alive than support Democrats. And I think that's like, that's even if you don't feel that way, right? Even if it feels like, I want him to eat dirt or whatever. Like, people have to recognize that is the better thing, the better attitude to have politically. But then this guy, and he got, something like 1,000 likes on Twitter. So it's not huge, but it's a guy that I happen to know. I've been on his program before, and so like I'm probably not going to go anymore. But he said, "F you and your pompous navel-gazing BS and your pathetic excuses for these belligerent dumbasses. Rural Americans refuse to vote Democrat because they're the dumbest, most bigoted pieces of shit in the country. That's it. That's literally it. Let them rot." And so, I'm like, okay, that seems pretty... that seems kind of bigoted, actually. And so I don't know. What do you make of when you come across folks with that sort of attitude?
Yeah, I get it a lot, and it's deeply frustrating. Look, I understand. I'll say this: I understand the sentiment of being extremely frustrated, mad, angry at people who voted the way that they did. Because I am. I get it. And I live in Tennessee. Right. Okay. I'm from West Virginia. I've lived in Florida. I've lived in all parts of this country where it's a deeply red part of this. I get it. But what I always see is like usually when it comes from people that like the people that say that usually build themselves as being very high-minded intellectuals, and I think it's one of the most like anti-intellectual arguments you could make, because you're making a gross generalization about an entire group of people, rural Americans, or an entire state, a very complex place that really is just arbitrary lines drawn on a map. It just like the gross generalizations are really, I think, harmful, because it creates such a communication breakdown in how we talk with each other and how we view each other in this country. And one of the things that I think is so frustrating about it is it shows such a lack of solidarity, both with people who did not vote like that in those areas, because there are a lot, with people who didn't vote because they didn't feel like the Democrats presented to them anything that was better. Which, look, I understand people's feelings about that. I don't necessarily agree with that a lot, but I understand where people are coming from if they feel like that. And it also is like, even if somebody voted for Donald Trump, I don't want their Medicaid ripped away from them and their lives jeopardized and them potentially die, because that is what will happen when they lose Medicaid. And this is like, also, I think internet just desensitizes people. We see this all the time. I mean, there's like a natural disaster in Kentucky or West Virginia. We always get the FAFO. Oh, you voted for this. No, not a single person voted to have their lives destroyed, their families killed, their home washed away in a flood. Not a single person. So this attitude is just, it's a very privileged attitude, because a lot of those people, I believe, don't have like anybody in their lives that voted for Donald Trump, for example. Whereas people, like, if you grew up in Appalachia in the South, I guarantee you have a family member that did, or somebody close to you that did. And it makes it like you have complicated relationships with those people sometimes, but you also learn that like you don't win back those people. You don't have like, you have to be able to have conversations with those people in order to actually build effective coalitions if you're trying to win back power in any type of government or anything like that. Like, you can't just cast aside those people, because they're people at the end of the day. And there's a lot of reasons that cause people to vote the way that they do. The other thing I'll just say, and to put a button on that, is like, I think what drives me the most crazy about this is, again, the gross generalizations about it. Mm-hmm. And I think that the reason why that drives me crazy is because like my podcast, the media platform I've created, is kind of stands to be a force against that type of behavior. The people that say these things, they're basing these opinions based on an electoral map with a binary color set, red and blue. And that tells you nothing about a state other than who went out and turned out to vote for an election. That's it. You know, it doesn't tell you about the gerrymandering in a state. It doesn't tell you about the voter suppression that occurs in the state. It doesn't tell you about the access that people have to polling locations in the state. It doesn't tell you about anything about that state at all. It doesn't tell you about, like, you know, the hundreds of thousands or millions of people that didn't vote that way in the state. And I think it really is dismissive of people who are trying to do a lot of work in those places to make it a better place to live for people, who are trying to make it a place that's safe for trans people to live, or for people of color to live, or for people to like give birth to children who may need access to abortion or something. And so it makes that job so much harder. And I can tell you that from a firsthand example. And I work with, I talk with, and I work with a lot of people who do mutual aid, and it really just makes them so angry when they see people. And it's a lot of times it's like these lefty liberal people who say those types of things. And it makes them so angry because they're like, we're building community out here. We're trying to help people. We don't ask who they voted for. We're just trying to help them survive. And that's oftentimes what a lot of people are doing. And so I just think that it's such a callous way of viewing an entire set of people that you clearly don't know anything about, and it's lacking in this type of solidarity that we need in order to move forward and to actually like live in the type of world that you want. Like if you want the type of policies that make your life better, you need an effective coalition that's going to bring in people that you otherwise are not going to agree with. That's just reality. That's life. People don't vote like based on just binary things like that. There are a lot of Trump voters that would 100% support a lot of very progressive and even leftist policies if you talk to them and brand it in a way that's different. I guarantee you in that, because I've talked to many of them.
Right. And I mean, even in places like Alabama, I mean, Alabama went for Trump one of the one of the highest numbers of any state in the country, and even still a majority of eligible voters in the state did not vote for him.
Yep.
You know, I mean, he won 65% of the people that voted, but only 58.5% of people voted in 2024. So, you know, there was something like 3.8 million registered voters roundabouts in Alabama, and only 1.46 million voted for Trump. So a majority of people did not vote for Donald Trump in Alabama, and that is totally left out of, you know, these big generalizations. So, well, Chuck, I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we let you go?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it. I really appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate the work that you all do. I think it's really important that the Valley Labor Report exists, especially in a place like Alabama. I think the work that you do to support unions and just lift up the type of working class people that really make our world what it is, but Alabama what it is incredibly important. So I want to just express my gratitude for you and for the work that you all do.
Appreciate it, Chuck. Same to you, and look forward to having you on again soon.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Bye. We got a few other stories. If anybody wants to call in, happy to hear thoughts on anything that we've talked about today. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. The United Auto Workers are on the move in the South, particularly in Kentucky and Alabama. Adam, talk to us about let's talk about what they've been doing in Kentucky first. What's the latest there?
Yeah, big news coming out of Kentucky. The UAW is calling on the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, to investigate Ford and Blue Oval SK for violating federal labor law before it sets the date for an election to ensure a fair and democratic vote, one that is hopefully free from illegal employer intimidation, retaliation, and coercion. So a supermajority of workers at Blue Oval SK, which is the electric vehicle battery joint venture between Ford and SK On, filed for a union election with the UAW back in January, demanding safer working conditions, the affordable health care they were originally promised, and a voice on the job. But since then, Blue Oval and Ford have launched a scorched earth anti-union campaign designed to scare workers and chill support. Instead of respecting the legal process or workers' rights to choose, UAW says Blue Oval has illegally fired and retaliated against vocal union supporters, unlawfully forced workers into closed-door meetings, and threatened to shut down the plant. The company has also bought up anti-union ads, distributed anti-union swag, and brought in high-priced consultants to expose workers to non-stop anti-union campaigning. Ford knows better. For over 80 years, Ford workers have had a union and a voice, but at Blue Oval SK, they're doing everything they can to stop these workers from having the same thing, said Laura Dickerson, UAW Vice President and Director of the Ford Department. She continued, "You can't have a fair vote when the company is flooding the plant with fear and propaganda." Workers say the company's actions have poisoned the atmosphere around the election, especially in a workplace already plagued by serious safety concerns. A recent Louisville Courier-Journal investigation revealed that Blue Oval SK workers have faced toxic chemical exposure, broken bones, and faulty safety equipment. Blue Oval SK wants to act like there are no safety issues here, but the chemicals we work with are dangerous. We want the ability to speak up and make things safer in a contract. That's what a union is about, said Rob Collette, a production associate there. Other workers described being told to work without proper gear and warned not to talk about forming a union. UAW Region 8 Director Tim Smith said these Blue Oval workers are brave as hell. They stood up and organized because they want what everyone deserves, a safe job and a voice at work. Battery jobs are growing fast here in Kentucky, but they should be good, safe union jobs, not jobs where workers get hurt and silenced. We need a fair shot to vote without the company trying to rig the outcome. Elected leaders can't look the other way while this industry grows. They need to have workers' backs. Workers in the UAW are calling on the NLRB to hold the company accountable in the election until the board can begin investigating the company's actions and restore the conditions for a free and fair vote. We are excited to vote yes. We've been waiting for this for a long time. However, we are asking the NLRB to ensure a fair playing field, said Emily Druke, in the Quality Department. And the campaign at Blue Oval SK is part of a growing wave of worker organizing in the EV battery industry, including major wins at Ultium Cells in Ohio and Tennessee. Workers across the South are standing up and demanding what they've earned, a union and a voice on the job.
We've been reading from a UAW press release about the latest at the Blue Oval plant. They mentioned in that press release some reporting from the Louisville Courier-Journal, where the journal was talking about some of the concerns about safety and stuff at the plant. Here's just a small snippet just to illustrate the concern about retaliation for talking about the safety issues. The Courier-Journal reports contractors and Blue Oval SK workers said they feared termination for speaking up or filing complaints to state labor officials. One complainant stated he would like to be kept anonymous to the company because they terminate anyone who reports any issues, state records show. Quote, "If you want to stay employed, you do what you're told," unquote, Chad Johnson, who works in the plant's quality module lab, told the Courier-Journal. State law prohibits discrimination or termination of workers for filing labor complaints or requesting a state inspection. However, a contract worker left a voicemail with state officials describing sickness and lung irritation from mold in the plant and said his supervisor told him, quote, "Don't tell anybody." And so that's the kind of stuff that these folks are dealing with. Not only, we're not even talking about retaliation for organizing, right? We're just talking about retaliation for making known the conditions in the plant, right? I mean, this is really terrible stuff that the company is doing here. And so kudos to the workers for organizing with the UAW. And that is the way, I just want to underscore for people that are getting concerned at the plant at Blue Oval in Kentucky, the way to make these things stop, the way to make the health concerns end, and the way to make the retaliation end is not by just stopping speaking out. Stop not speaking out about it, by putting your head down and working. It's by coming together and fighting back collectively, right? Because you all know that they can't do the work without you all there, right? They can fire any one of you, any two of you, any 3 or 4 or 5 of you, but if you all come together and you all fight back, they can't fire all of you. They have to have your labor, right? And so that is why unionizing is so important, so that you can have the protection of your sisters and brothers as you're organizing on the job. That's why workers at Ford, GM, and Stellantis have higher wages, better working conditions, things like that than workers in non-union auto plants. I mean, that's why a worker at Honda in Alabama makes less money than a McDonald's worker in Denmark, because the McDonald's workers in Denmark are unionized. And so they have better pay, they have better benefits, they have more time off than somebody who is manufacturing automobiles in the state of Alabama. You don't want to be a statistic like that, so you need to organize. You need to join the UAW.
That's right. That's right. And, I think it's important to note that this is not the only UAW update. We mentioned it in last week in Southern Labor, but this organizing wave in the South continues and includes Huntsville, Alabama, which is where we broadcast, of course, and where UAW filed a petition last week at International Motors seeking to represent 220 auto workers. AL.com did put out an article, and pull from there just a bit. Illinois-based International Motors is a manufacturer of trucks, buses, engines, and parts, among other items. The Huntsville plant on Short Pike Road Southwest is a powertrain manufacturing facility, turning out diesel engines and transmissions. The plant currently supplies International's vehicle assembly plants in Springfield, Ohio, and Escobedo, Mexico. In a statement, International Motors said it respects the, quote, right of all employees to establish unions and pursue employee representation. They continued, we also remain committed to maintaining a fair and open dialogue with our employees while fully complying with all applicable labor laws. Regardless of union-related activity, our focus continues to be on fostering a fair, competitive, and supportive workplace for all of our employees. This comes amid a context where the UAW last year earmarked $40 million to push for organizing among the non-union auto and electric battery workers throughout the South. We know about the campaign in Mercedes over there in Tuscaloosa County. It was a tough defeat last year. And so there's still a lot of organizing to happen. There are around 50,000 non-union auto workers in the state of Alabama alone, right? That is huge. And just for context, this filing of 220 workers here in Huntsville, this would make it the fourth largest filing since January 2020 in the state of Alabama. We went back and looked at all the filings on the National Labor Relations Board website, and folks, yeah, it's kind of bleak, honestly, when you look into it and you see the number of filings we've had. Just, for additional context, we've had, I believe, less than 60 filings in 5.5 years, which even if they all won, would only total less than 9,000 workers, right? So not even coming close to keeping up with union membership density. But yeah, this is a really big deal. The fact that UAW is organizing these auto workers here in Huntsville at International Motors, again, over 200 workers there. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, and we're looking forward to following that and hopefully cheering them on to a victory very soon. So big updates there between Blue Oval in Kentucky and this facility here in Huntsville, Alabama. Sending our love and support to UAW as they continue to try to organize here in the South.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing them win on that, and having a new local in our labor council.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, for you local folks, definitely, keep your ears and eyes open.
Yeah. The Teamsters have also been, there's also been a bunch of Teamster news as well. Adam, what's been going on there?
Yeah, so we have some news on the Teamsters front. This time it's actually not about electoral politics or Teamster President Sean O'Brien's friendliness with anti-labor politicians. I know that's dominated a lot of Teamster news over the last year or so, but it's been nearly 2 years since the Teamsters wrapped up their historic contract negotiations with UPS, one that the union says included major wins on wages, overtime protections, and heat safety measures. But the story doesn't stop with the signed contract. A contract is only as strong as the enforcement from the workers and their unions. It's up to the union to breathe life into the words written in a collective bargaining agreement. And this week, we've seen some new developments, with the Teamsters demanding answers from UPS over alleged violations of those hard-won protections. And we mentioned it earlier in Last Week in Southern Labor. This includes slamming a new buyout offer from UPS as illegal. So last week, the Teamsters formally requested internal data from UPS related to multiple contract issues, including violations of heat safety rules, forced overtime, and staffing shortages. The union says they've received numerous reports from members across the country that UPS is failing to meet its obligations, especially when it comes to retrofitting trucks for extreme heat conditions. And let's talk about the heat issue first. We mentioned it during the show a couple times already. It's come up. It's July. It's very hot, especially here in Alabama and across the South. But we've had heat waves throughout the country. And this is personal for a lot of UPS workers. Over the years, drivers have collapsed and some have died from heat-related illnesses in trucks with no air conditioning. And that's why the August 2023 contract was such a big deal. It's supposed to require UPS to equip 28,000 delivery vehicles with air conditioning by 2028. The contract also mandated fans in all new vehicles and heat shields to reduce cab temperatures. But here we are in summer 2025, and the union says only about 10% of that fleet has been upgraded. So yeah, people are still out there cooking in metal boxes in 100-degree heat. The union says too many of their members are still sweating it out in brutal conditions, while UPS drags its feet. But it's not just about the heat. The union is also tracking forced overtime and understaffing, issues that have plagued UPS workers for years. Under the Collective Bargaining Agreement, or CBA, UPS agreed to create more full-time jobs by converting part-timers and ensuring proper staffing levels. Despite the company agreeing to protections in the contract, the Teamsters say management continues to stretch workers thin, skipping required hiring and pushing remaining drivers past safe limits. So the union filed an official request for information, or RFI, demanding documentation from UPS so they can investigate the scale of the violations and file grievances as needed. They're also calling on rank-and-file members to speak up and document every infraction, because this is about enforcing their rights in each and every workplace. Meanwhile, UPS made a big announcement this past week that's raising eyebrows and concerns among Teamsters. UPS announced a plan to offer voluntary severance to full-time drivers, part of a broader move to cut 20,000 jobs across the company and overhaul its domestic delivery network. UPS is offering voluntary buyout packages to some veteran full-time drivers, those with at least 10 years of service. And UPS is framing this as just a cost-saving measure, citing slower package volume since the pandemic peak. But the Teamsters see something more troubling here. Here's what Fred Zuckerman, General Secretary-Treasurer of the Teamsters, had to say. Quote, "All drivers should reject this illegal and insulting buyout when UPS makes it public. UPS has forced buyouts on its own management in the past. They can't force anything on us. CEO Carol Tomé can screw over her own team, but she's not going to push around the Teamsters." And the union's concern is that these buyouts aren't just about optional exits. They're part of a longer-term plan to cut good union jobs and force the remaining workforce to do more with less. UPS management has a long history of trying to grind down labor costs, even as they rake in billions in profits. UPS is trying to weasel its way out of creating good union jobs here in America by dangling insulting buyouts in front of Teamsters drivers. It's an illegal violation of our national contract, said Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien. UPS is obligated to establish tens of thousands of new full-time jobs under the agreement, but CEO Carol Tomé and UPS's corporate managers are hoping that if they offer paltry severance packages to enough workers, no one will notice the company is setting the union's contract on fire. UPS Teamsters work too damn hard to be treated with such disrespect. And let's not forget, drivers being targeted here are more experienced Teamsters with deep knowledge of the job and the union, so losing those folks could weaken union strength on the shop floor. So for all of those reasons, the Teamsters say they'll keep fighting. And, looking at some of the big takeaways here, this is where real union power will come into play. Not just signing a contract, but making it real. Holding the boss accountable. Demanding the results and the data. Organizing members to speak up and file grievances. And it's honestly a good reminder for all of us, whether you're a Teamster or not. You don't win a better world just by hoping the boss keeps their promises. You win it by standing together and fighting for what's yours. If you're a UPS Teamster or you know one, we'd love to hear how this is playing out in your area. You can call in live, of course, or leave us a voicemail throughout the week at 844-899-TVLR. And for everyone else, this is why we always say, if you don't have a union yet, it's time to build one. Because this kind of enforcement, this kind of potential power, it only comes from being organized.
We've got another union update, this one about the postal unions. We talked to you about a couple of weeks ago about how the Senate was trying to not only stop future spending on postal EVs and charging infrastructure, but also to sell existing EVs within the postal fleet and rip up the charging infrastructure, which would, as we quoted from the reporting, like there's no market for secondary postal EVs, like nobody's going to buy that, and there's no market for used charging infrastructure, right? So it would not ultimately have recouped almost any money at all. Would have cost the Postal Service like $1 billion or something to get rid of and then have to replace all of the EVs that they have currently. And so ultimately, I did look, and that did not make it into the ultimate piece of legislation that was signed. So that was good. And it, in large part, that was because of the activism of the NALC and the APWU. But somebody called in and gave us left us a voicemail with his thoughts on this proposal that the Republicans had. So let's go ahead and hear his thoughts.
Hi, my name is Paul. I live in Severna Park, Maryland, which is just in the middle of Baltimore and Annapolis. And my local post office is in the process of literally ripping up its entire back service area and putting in the chargers. And they actually delivered one of the electric vehicles. And if it's true in this bill that they want to not only sell but rip up these chargers, I don't know how that's not gross mismanagement of funds and an impeachable offense, because the amount of money and time that they have put in to put them in and literally wasted the post office's services because of this upgrade to rip them all out. I don't even know how that would even be possible. They just literally put in the charging units. I saw them go up the other day. I drive past it every day. I am absolutely flabbergasted. This can't get past it. I just can't understand this.
Yeah, you and me both. And thankfully, it was not passed. So your unions, APWU, the NALC, presumably the other ones, the National Postal Mail Handlers and the Rural Letter Carriers, fought against this because it would be so bad for the Postal Service as an entity, right? To have to waste money literally burning infrastructure. It's just so ridiculous. So that was defeated, as were a lot of the really bad provisions that would have attacked postal workers and the Postal Service. Now, obviously, we've talked about pretty in detail during this program about how problematic the One Big Beautiful Bill is, but specifically with regard to the Postal Service, the APWU and the NALC claim that every direct attack on postal retirement security was stripped from the bill before its final passage. So I think there's some other good news as far as, a lack of attack on postal workers. I don't think there's anything, positive that came out of it, but at least there is the absence of direct attacks. Adam, what were some of the other highlights as far as what got taken out?
Yeah, I mean, it could have been a lot worse. And, we've talked about it throughout the day. We know this is a $4.5 trillion tax cut for the ultra wealthy, paid for by the working class. We know it attacks Medicaid, food assistance, green energy programs, while expanding these tax breaks and increases defense spending. But, thanks to that all hands on deck campaign by the postal and federal union members, again, like you said, they're claiming that all of the attacks on postal retirement security were stripped from the bill before its final package. According to NALC, the final package was stripped of any provision that would negatively impact letter carriers, their bargaining rights, and the postal network. And as a reminder, there were numerous changes to the retirement system for Postal Service workers that would have cut benefits, as well as establishing a filing fee for the Merit Systems Protection Board claims and appeals, which, seems bad, and disposing of the Postal Service's electrical vehicle fleet and rescinding EV funding, as we mentioned. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, declared APWU President Dimenstein. What is dubbed as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is beautiful if you are part of the 1%, the fossil fuel industry, or multinational defense contractors. For the rest of us, the working folks, this is as ugly as it gets, Dimenstein continued. We are pleased that through concerted efforts, including from our members and the APWU, the major attacks on federal and postal retirement benefits were stripped out of the final package. But let's be clear, Congress shamefully voted for a massive transfer of wealth from the working and low-income people to make permanent $4 trillion in tax breaks for corporate America, Wall Street, and the fat cats. It should never be acceptable to reward those who need it the least by taking away Medicaid health care benefits, nutritional assistance, and educational support from those who need it the most. So, they're walking a fine line here because on the one hand, it's important to claim the victory, right? To claim the victory that some of these attacks were pushed back. But that doesn't make it a good bill by any stretch of the imagination. And even with those attacks, currently at bay, the Postal Service is still under fire. And important advocates have been sounding the alarm inside Congress recently. On June 24th, the House Government Operations Subcommittee convened a panel titled The Route Forward for the U.S. Postal Service. Invited were big mail shippers, including the Package Shippers Association, Lexington Institute, and Citizens Against Government Waste, pushing for hiring freezes, subcontracting, and public-private mail handling schemes. As critics note, these proposals pave a path toward full or at least partial privatization of the USPS. Voices countering those came from labor. Earlier mentioned APWU President Mark Dimenstein. He had written testimony that declared privatization offers the illusion of profit, but costs will instantly rise for the majority of businesses and customers. And of course, he was on our show a few weeks ago and brought up the experience in Europe, where some countries did privatize the Postal Service, and that's exactly what happened. He underscored USPS's mission, quote, to bind the nation, provide prompt, reliable services to all communities. And he asserted that it must remain an independent, non-taxpayer-funded public service. Also testifying was NALC President Brian Renfro, drawing sharp attention to life and death risk faced by letter carriers. He opened noting that recently a carrier in Dallas tragically died on duty, part of a worrying trend including extreme heat, rising assaults, and failing vehicles. Renfro warned that the mail cannot be protected if the people who deliver it aren't protected first. He urged Congress to pass the Protect Our Letter Carriers Act and demanded funding for safer, air-conditioned postal fleets and a robust OSHA heat illness standard. So we've got the public versus private aspect, right? And privatization may please shareholders, but Dimenstein warns that it inevitably raises costs, especially in rural and low-income areas. And we've got the worker safety issue. From deadly heat to crime against carriers, USPS is an underprotected workforce. Renfro made the case that federal investment in vehicle modernization, heat protections, and criminal penalties is urgent. And the very idea of universal service is at risk. USPS delivers to every address in the United States, not just urban or profitable routes. Private carriers can't and won't serve these communities. Renfro stressed that over 52 million rural addresses depend solely on letter carriers. So here's how this plays out locally. When rural routes get cut or delivery slows, working families, especially in remote areas, feel it first. Farm bills, benefit statements, medicine, ballots, all are at risk. And when route carriers are unsafe, that's a community safety crisis. Congress can strengthen the United States Postal Service by, actually investing in the workforce, respecting and collaborating with their unions, and enabling postal retail outlets to offer additional services like postal banking, ID verification, or disaster relief assistance through partnerships, which are ideas backed both by labor unions as well as some lawmakers. The United States Postal Service isn't just a postal system. It's a vital public institution staffed by essential workers. When we talk about defending working class living standards, this should be central. Strong mail service, secure jobs, safe deliveries, universal access. And it's all connected. Solidarity with all the workers of the Postal Service out there listening. Appreciate you tuning in. Regardless of your job or your union, your work really matters. And we need a united working class movement to defend and improve the U.S. Postal Service. If you do work for the Postal Service, please give us a call. Leave us a voicemail, 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. Give us a call. Let us know how things are going out in your neck of the woods. And one last note for you postal workers, APWU members should note that ballot placement has been set for national election of officers. Ballots will start going out on September 10th. Jonathan Smith from the New York Metro Area Postal Union is facing A.J. Jones, Eastern Montgomery County, Pennsylvania area local, for president, among the many other offices on the ballot. So APWU members, make sure you're engaged in this election, and I hope members of all the other postal unions are getting involved however they can to build strong fighting unions.
Yep, absolutely. We got a couple of callers on the line. Let's take 256-350 first. 256-350. What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is Joe.
Hey,
Calling
Joe.
from
Joe.
Decatur, Jacob.
Joe, it's good to hear
really
from you.
quick,
What's on your mind? Yeah.
Yeah. The international court that's trying to organize with the UAW over there is, and y'all might not know this, and I may be mistaken, but I think back when that plant was originally announced to be built, if I'm not mistaken, that was a company called Navistar.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
I can't remember who actually owns them, but the best I remember when they came, there was some talks about them actually coming and getting automatic recognition. Can't even remember how many years ago that was. And somewhere down the line, that plant went from being the Navistar plant to this international plant. And most of it, the best I remember, was because the politicians was up in the air about it being an organized plant. And they was concerned about, maybe, if y'all get time, and I know you're busy, maybe you can check into that and see if I'm remembering things right. That's all I really wanted to say on that. And really, really quick, and I'll get off here. I happened to catch a little podcast the other night with a guy that was running for governor here in Alabama as a Democrat. Y'all may or may not be aware of him. Chad Chig Martin.
Yeah,
you
I've
hear
heard of
this
him.
guy? Okay,
Yes.
well, I happened to catch his podcast. I don't know if y'all seen it or not, but 95% of, I mean, he was doing a live answering questions or comments, and most of it surrounded the hemp business, THC business in Alabama. A few questions about rural hospitals and so forth, so on. I think he's an owner of some kind of hemp business until they put him out of business.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was. But I happened to type a comment in that was just simply what your thoughts on automatic recognition for plants that had a majority of the cards signed. And his answer to my question was, I don't know nothing about no unions. Never been in one, don't know nothing about them. So that was it. So if you get a chance to talk to him, you need to kind of enlighten him a little on, there is still some of us out here that'll cast the vote just based on that. If he don't know nothing about it, I sure ain't going to vote for him. But that's all I got, Jacob. Y'all take care, man.
All right, I appreciate it, man. Thank you much.
Yeah, great to hear from you, Joe. And appreciate you flagging that. I'm familiar with the candidate, but I hadn't heard any of that. And yeah, that's not. I mean, hey, I'll appreciate his honesty. I appreciate his honesty and being, straightforward that he doesn't know anything about it. That's more than I can say for some of the politicians down there who don't know anything about it and still want to talk about it and write laws about it. In fact.
Yeah. Looking at some of this stuff, it looks like Navistar came to Navistar International Corporation. It looks like they came to Huntsville in 1999. And then in 2014, they moved some of their production to Illinois, eliminating like a few hundred jobs. I'm not seeing anything related to politicians talking about union stuff related to this plant specifically.
But I appreciate the tip. That's something we can look into a little deeper for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We got one more caller on the line. This one also from a 256 area code. 256 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
This is Dwayne. Hey, Jacob.
Hey, Dwayne.
Hey, Adam.
Yeah, what's on your
mind?
mind?
Know, press secretary. First thing I wanted to say is in response to your last caller is I may run in November against Tuberville. Let's not forget that. And I am against SB 231. I believe it violates the freedom of speech rights of businesses, and that court-wise it shouldn't even be allowed to make it, guys.
Right.
Now, what else I was going to say? And I would be that going toward Abraham Lincoln type candidate that you talked about the other week, Adam.
Right.
And what else was I going to tell you? And only 18%. You remember you were talking about the percentages that ran in Alabama a while ago, Jacob. Only 18% voted in the governor's election on the Republican Party. That everyone can cross over to vote on and become a Republican if they don't like some of the exaggerated things of the Democrat Party. And I would be the person that you would want instead of Tommy Tuberville. Now, what else I was going to tell you, and I wanted to also tell you, Jacob, how much I really, really liked your interview with Alan Treadaway, who wanted to arrest people who were just standing at protests. Yeah. It was one of the best interviews, and I think it made a huge difference. He changed his mind. Now, I was going to tell you about the AI being relegated where the states can do things. Guys, this is not necessarily a good idea. And if we don't see it for what it could be in the future, you'll be talking about it on the show in about 3 years. And why I'm saying this is because
I mean, there is some, I can hear you. And there's some good news on that front. You know, the AI, there was a provision in this piece of legislation that's been going through in D.C. that would ban states from regulating AI for 10 years. And fortunately, that was taken out. So states, now this is not, it's not to say that DC is regulating AI, which, I mean, there should be some federal regulations on AI, but this does, so states will still be allowed.
And local government as
and
well.
local governments, if the states allow it. I don't know if local governments can regulate AI in Alabama because of the preemption. I don't know. You'd have to have a lawyer look at that. But Alabama can regulate AI because that provision was taken out of the bill. Yeah.
I am saying that is in some cases a bad thing. Follow with me here. When we had phone service instead of internet, you couldn't have wiretapping, and it was a federal thing that you couldn't have wiretapping. Have you got me?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, let's say we went to internet or anything else, and you let the persons that are generally in charge in the states that wanted it to come back to the states, they are going to make adaptations that make it where they have more control, more power, more along the lines of what Treadaway was wanting to do with the protest, Jacob. And if you look into it and you really dive deep into it, they're not going to use it for good purposes. They are going to use it a lot of times for the same things like SB 231. And there's not going to be anything that stops them. It will be up to persons that may not have much knowledge about AI to be part of grand juries that decide things that have to do with regulations that are made by AI. Have you got me? And the persons could have an extreme labor unions, all types of things could have a very extreme negative connotations to what's been done there, guys, if you really look into it.
And so you're saying
that's what I wanted to,
you're saying that you don't think that state governments should regulate AI? Am I hearing that correctly?
Okay. Eventually, Jacob, it's going to interfere with interstate commerce when AI is affected in different ways by different states.
Mm-hmm.
But just like anyone could tell you that they're going to want to do something. It's going to be like the Ladies for Liberty going against the libraries. It's going to be the Ladies of Liberty using AI. Have you got me? They will be the ones wanting AI structure to be where they can have a control mechanism on things within the states and the communities. Watch and hide and see if I'm not correct there, unless some type of tapering or something that reels them in stops them in those areas, guys.
Yeah, I think it's one of those issues that I would much prefer the federal government regulate. But I mean, obviously, you know, we don't have the appetite for that in DC right now. But I hear what you're saying. I think it's going to be way too complicated, and I don't think it's going to be very effective to leave it up to state and local governments to do this. Ultimately, we need national and global, you know, regulations and protections. And just for context, there is an official task force in Alabama on AI. This is what Governor Kay Ivey set up to, you know, study this issue and deal with how the state responds to it. And it's got a mixture of folks on it. You know, there's 4 legislators. There's 6 people from Kay Ivey's cabinet. There's 2 university folks. No labor folks on there. Surprise, surprise. Nobody from the working class is, much less the union movement, is on this committee. But yeah, I appreciate the call, Dwayne. Appreciate you bringing that issue up.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot, guys.
Y'all too.
You ready to roll, or do you want to get to something else?
Well, we had a couple other stories, but I think we're already past time today, so I'm happy to save those to next time if you want.
Yeah, I'm good with
that. We can save those. We got a couple of cool stories that we'll hit up next week for sure. Some cool things from across the South, as well as some labor history. So we'll hit that up next week. I do want to just remind folks, you know, leave us a voicemail throughout the week. We played one today. If you didn't get a chance to call in live, we always appreciate those voicemails. So go ahead and leave those throughout the week, anytime. 844-899-TVLR. It could be responding to something we said or something a guest said today. It could be asking us questions you want us to respond to, sharing something that's grinding your gears. We love to hear from y'all. Appreciated all the phone calls today. I appreciated the Teamster brother who called in earlier, about difficulties that we were facing as organizers and activists and wrestling with some of the real crisis we're dealing with in this country, including a moral crisis, I would argue. Love those kind of calls and just love people's input. We really appreciate your feedback. And on that note, please do let us know if there's anything you want us to cover on the show, if there's someone you'd like for us to interview, if there's a show that you think we should appear on, someone else's program, help us get connected. We'd love to do that. We'd love to collaborate with other projects. But ultimately, your feedback is really what drives it and what helps us know what to do and who to connect with. So definitely let us know if there's other programs out there. And that's all I got. So solidarity forever, y'all.
Yep. See y'all next week.